headline in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Cracks appear in Russia's truce as Britain warns a mass evacuation of nationals is impossible.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Tuesday, the 27th of June. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Leading the news on this Tuesday morning, the Foreign Secretary has warned that an airlift evacuation of British nationals from Russia in the event of civil war would be impossible, but that the government is looking at all scenarios.
It comes as the truce that halted the advance on Moscow begins to fall apart, with Vladimir Putin vowing to punish the mutineers in a televised address. It follows comments from the leader of the Wagner group calling the coup a masterclass in how to launch an invasion.
The former Health Secretary Matt Hancock will today become the first politician involved in the COVID response to face the pandemic inquiry. He will give evidence about the UK's preparedness for a pandemic.
Prince William has called for an end to the prejudice against rough sleepers as he announced a major 5-year plan to end homelessness. Launching the initiative yesterday, he visited housing and training projects in London, Bournemouth and Newport.
As a new report finds English cricket to be racist, sexist and elitist, Paul Coyte will be here with the sports news.
Yeah, it really is damning, Eamonn. I've got to tell you, we'll find out more later. Also, Conor Benn's failed drugs test looks like it is actually down to too many dodgy eggs.
And we'll find out...
Be careful with those eggs.
You do, always, never too careful with those. And we're also going to find out if the sunshine's now come to an end with your latest weather update.
Things have been clouding over overnight, a greyer day today compared to yesterday. There'll be some rain around as well, chiefly across the north. Join me later for a full GB News weather forecast.
So here we are on this Tuesday morning. I hope your day is going well so far. Stay with us until 9:30. Our top story is this.
An airlift evacuation of British nationals from Russia in the event of civil war would be impossible, according to the Foreign Secretary.
Now, his comments came as the truce between Vladimir Putin and the leader of the Wagner group appeared to fracture, with the Russian president calling for the organisers of the coup to be brutally punished. He did this in a televised address.
The organisers of the rebellion, betraying their country, their people, betrayed those who were lured into the crime. They lied to them, pushed them towards death, under fire, to shoot their own people. It was precisely this outcome, fratricide, that Russia's enemies wanted. Both the neo-Nazis in Kiev and their Western masters, and all sorts of national traitors. They wanted Russian soldiers to kill each other.
So, apparently it was all kiss and make up and everything was friendly and happy. Obviously not.
Exactly. Well, the address followed a message from the mercenary leader Prigozhin in what he called his advance on Moscow. He described it as a masterclass and said the Russian public were disappointed when he stopped.
So in America, President Joe Biden has spoken overnight addressing Putin's accusations that the West was involved in the mutiny.
I also convened our key allies on a Zoom call to make sure we're all on the same page. It's critical that we're coordinated in our response and coordinated in what we to anticipate. They agreed with me that we had to make sure we gave Putin no excuse. Let me emphasize, we gave Putin no excuse to blame this on the West or to blame this on NATO. We made clear that we were not involved. We had nothing to do with it. This was part of a struggle within the Russian system.
Struggle within the Russian system. Let's find out more now as we cross to Ukraine for reaction. Kira Rudik, who leads the Golos party in Ukraine's parliament. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Eamonn. Good morning, Isabel. Thank you so much for having me today.
An absolute pleasure. And look at the intrigue here. This honeymoon didn't last long, did it?
Well, sure. Let's make it very clear. There are no good guys there. It is a fight between one group of Russians that wanted to come here and kill us and another group of Russians that wanted to come here and kill us. And when the coup was on, we were vouching for both teams here in Ukraine, because the more helicopters they take down inside Russia, the more planes, the more tanks, the less would come here and try to commit all the war crimes and destroy us. But the important thing that the world have observed is that Putin's power is extremely weak. You know, it reminds me the Wizard of Oz when the great and terrible turned out to be just an old, weak man. So this is exactly what is happening in Russia when Prigozhin was able to show that Putin is not invincible, that Putin can be taken down and you just need like a little bit more power. So of course, every distraction that Russians have out of the front is a good chance for us to push forward on a counteroffensive. And of course, the destabilization of situation in Russia is something that would allow us to move forward. However, I think everybody who watched Putin's speech was surprised with the amount of the word West, Nazi, NATO, and which is making it obviously that the problem is just within Russia and they just cannot agree on themselves and cannot create a stable situation.
Of course, Kira Rudik, he also mentioned Ukraine in that address overnight and suggesting that it was either Ukraine or the West that was behind this mutiny. So do you think that, you know, aside from trying to deal with the threat of a coup, he'll double down on Ukraine as a result of this latest effort?
Well, just making it clear that Wagner group that created, launching the coup, was one of the key mercenary organizations that were fighting in Bakhmut and on the Eastern Front. They are known to be ruthless and to be an extremely dangerous group. So it doesn't add on any kind of logic how Ukraine could be behind them marching on Moscow. Even if I'm trying to make it up in my mind, and I cannot.
Zelensky visiting the front line yesterday and, you know, absolutely clear that yesterday and this weekend has been good for Ukraine.
Well, of course, whatever destabilizes Russia and takes their eyes off the front allows us to push forward at the counteroffensive. Also, it really demotivates their soldiers at the front who don't know if there will be not left alone, or if their power would not change, and then they will be prosecuted for what they are doing right now, right? We are applauding to President being at the front lines and supporting our troops and motivating them, because we know that the counteroffensive is a very complicated action, and because we know that right now our soldiers are in extreme danger, moving through the minefields that Russians have put together over the last 6 months, and going through like really dangerous thresholds.
Kira Rudik, thank you very much indeed on this Tuesday morning. We've got to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, and glory to Ukraine.
Thank you. 8 minutes past 6 o'clock. The Foreign Secretary will travel to Sweden today, where he will reaffirm Britain's support for the country's NATO membership.
Well, joining us in the studio is the political analyst Leon Emirali. Good morning to you, Leon. I'm sure this will probably happen. I suppose the question is, how long can Turkey potentially delay it from happening, and will it be quick enough?
Yeah, I think this is the big point of the story here, which is Turkey's objection really to Sweden joining. They had similar objections to Finland joining because there is a perception that there is pro-Kurdish sentiment within those countries. Now, they let Finland through earlier in the year, and I think we probably will see Sweden eventually join. But ultimately, this is a backfire for Vladimir Putin, because he invaded Ukraine with the intent of getting NATO away from Russian borders. All it's doing is bringing NATO closer to Russian borders through the accession of Finland, through the accession of Sweden, as to be expected. But it's a big week in NATO. We aren't necessarily guaranteed to see Sweden join, but I think if Turkey can get some concessions from NATO, then they're likely to see them join the bloc.
And what will that mean for Russia? Because it will almost form a sort of ring on that top border of Russia, apart from, I think, Kaliningrad and almost St. Petersburg. I mean, as you say, totally the opposite of what Putin ever wanted.
Yeah, I mean, there's two schools of thought here. The first is that actually we are antagonising, NATO is antagonising Russia by bringing NATO closer to the Russian mainland. And the second school of thought is that actually we need to shore up our defences on the eastern flank of Europe. So, that is where we're going to see the argument being held. And I think Putin's response to that, I imagine he's going to come out quite clearly and use the same sort of rhetoric we've seen before, trying to ramp up tensions. But ultimately, it's backfired. His strategy hasn't worked.
What sort of tensions will there be, the former Health Secretary Matt Hancock, before this parliamentary inquiry today?
Well, Matt Hancock's appearing in front of the COVID inquiry. This is about looking at the UK's preparedness for the pandemic rather than the way in which the UK handled the pandemic, which is an important distinction. But I think there's going to be questions asked of Matt Hancock about, was the NHS set up to deal with a pandemic like coronavirus that we saw? Was there enough money in the budget for him to be able to deliver on that preparedness? And I think Matt Hancock is going to want to be saving his own reputation, because, he took a hit during the pandemic as Health Secretary, for obvious reasons, his affair, his breaking of the rules. This is unlikely to focus on that. This will be about whether or not the UK was prepared. We've seen David Cameron already appear in front of that inquiry saying that actually the UK was prepared for more like a flu-like pandemic, and the coronavirus wasn't fitting that bill. So that's why we potentially had 175,000 deaths.
And we've also seen George Osborne appearing. What have we learned from the tone, the style of this inquiry so far, and what sort of day, based on that, do you think Matt Hancock is likely to have?
Yeah, there seems to have been two sort of main focuses, Isabel. The first is Brexit. So there was talk that a lot of planning within Whitehall, planning within government was taken up by how we prepared to leave the European Union, and that might have meant we'd taken our eye off what was going on with being prepared for a pandemic. And the second is around austerity and budget cuts. Obviously, we saw David Cameron, George Osborne trying to balance the national books when they were in power, and some argue that they actually stripped back money from the NHS, stripped back money from the health service to be able to prepare for this type of event. And I think that's where this is going to focus on Matt Hancock. Now, Hancock, he was the one who was ultimately in charge, so there's going to be questions about whether he agrees with those sentiments or whether he's got a different view.
I think I'll find it very interesting whether people will be able to go with the Matt Hancock switch, 1 minute no credibility and then trying to give himself lots of credibility. Today it'll be interesting to see if the public, indeed if the inquiry buy into that, but I suspect he's gone beyond the point of no return. He is a man without credibility.
He is, and he's straddling this strange sort of point, Eamonn, of being part celebrity going in the jungle, also being part politician. He's still a sitting MP, and I think he's struggling to find an identity. But we're going to see the serious Matt Hancock today, I'm sure. He's going to be wearing his suit and tie rather than, the T-shirt we see him sometimes wearing on the more celebrity-focused programme. So I think he's going to be wanting to protect his reputation, try and position himself as someone of integrity, as someone who was able to do that important job at the heart of government during an incredibly important time for the country. But, Eamonn, I think you're right. The public are going to look at that and say, well, did we really trust this guy? Was he the right person to be in charge at the time?
Leon Emirali, as always, thanks very much indeed.
Thanks, Leon. Prince of Wales continues his tour of the country today, unveiling locations chosen to become blueprints for his new homeless project called Homewards.
Yesterday, Prince William visited Lambeth, Bournemouth and Newport to launch his 5-year campaign to end homelessness. And our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, has this report.
I first visited a homelessness shelter when I was 11 with my mother. The visits we made together left a deep and lasting impression.
5 years, 6 locations, 1 dream. A personal commitment to make homelessness rare, brief and unrepeated. Homewards, launched by Prince William yesterday, supports communities across the UK selected to become blueprints for solutions to end homelessness. One such blueprint will be formed in Lambeth, bringing together local charities, experts and advocates to create a tailor-made solution to support those needing a home. His Royal Highness visited Mosaic Clubhouse, which treats mental health patients as members, focusing on their strengths rather than their weaknesses. The Prince wanted to spotlight the link between poor mental health and homelessness.
It doesn't take much for a trauma around mental health to lead to other catastrophes in life, which can lead to homelessness. If you have a relationship breakdown, and that can be followed by loss of a job, you can very quickly find yourself without a home as well.
43-year-old Paul experienced homelessness when he was younger. Poor mental health meant he ended up in hospital. He thinks ending up homeless made his mental health worse.
When I was younger, in stages where I was homeless and that sort of thing, everything just gets so overwhelming and everything that you just can't function properly and everything and that. So when there's services like this, even if you are in a position of still being homeless, a lot of weight is lifted.
Prince William's conceded ending homelessness is a big challenge. An estimated 300,000 people are either sleeping rough, sofa surfing or stuck in temporary accommodation. And critics of the monarchy point out the future king's enormous wealth and privilege. Those close to the Prince of Wales insist he's aware of how fortunate he is, which is why he's using his public platform to promote lasting change to help end homelessness. Much better, some believe, than others.
If a politician says something, it's like in one ear and out the other sort of thing. But if someone like your future king is saying something, I think people take that a lot more to heart and serious.
The Prince of Wales also visited Bournemouth yesterday, highlighting how empowering people with skills can help them get a job, and Newport, where he saw an example of a community delivering long-term settled housing. Today, His Royal Highness continues his tour of the UK, visiting 3 more locations committed to tackling homelessness in their area. Cameron Walker, GB News, London.
OK, so the Homeless Roadshow continues today. The time, 16 minutes past 6.
Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. The chair of the Independent Commission for Equity in Cricket, Cindy Butts, said she encountered horrific stories in a report which investigated racism, sexism and misogyny in the sport. Ms Butts told the BBC that cricket culture in England and Wales is rotten, with the Commission making 44 recommendations.
Government's been urged to rule out detaining or forcibly removing children who are seeking asylum to Rwanda. A new report published by the Women and Equalities Committee raises concerns about what they call the unnecessary risks to vulnerable people. We're going to be talking to the committee's chair, Caroline Noakes, about that at 8:15 this morning.
Fresh food inflation has eased for a second month. The supermarkets cut the price of household staples. The chief executive of the British Retail Consortium says that if the current situation continues, it should drop to single digits later this year.
I thought it was 8 point something.
That's just general inflation, isn't it? Overall inflation. I'm not sure where food inflation is. Sticky.
19 or something.
Yeah, something horrendous.
Yeah. We'll have the latest. We're talking about money, and money in football seems to be absolutely no object. Manchester City bidding £90 million for Declan Rice from West Ham. We've got that and the rest of the transfer news. Crazy figures. Paul Coit next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. Time is 6:20. Still to come on today's programme. As Princess Diana's iconic chic jumper goes up for auction at 6:45, we'll find out how much it's projected to go for and why it's become so infamous.
And at 7:20, we work to get our bodies beach ready this summer. Well, some of you may. We'll ask if using cheat days is a good way to limit your food consumption or if it's a step on the road to weight gain.
And we love to hear from you throughout the course of the programme. Send us your thoughts this morning, gbviews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Just let's see how they stack up this morning. This is what we've got. The Express, first of all. Racist, sexist, elitist. English cricket has been labelled this in a damning report in discrimination at all levels of the game. In the Mirror, Andy Murray hints at his Wimbledon being his last, as he is one big injury away from ending his career. And women's cricket in The Guardian, as Gardner spins Australia to Ashes victory. Mr. Paul is with us now.
So, how are you?
Well, my friend, how are you?
That was like they used to do with Basil Brush, though. Mr. Paul. It was like Mr. Derek. Do you remember that?
Yes, you could have been Mr. Derek.
I could have been a Mr. Derek. Did you work with Basil Brush? I bet you worked with Basil Brush.
Of course I have.
Yeah. Boom, boom. That's it, yeah. There we go. It's too early for that. I'd lean back, but I'd end up fall off the chair. It'd be a disaster.
So English cricket.
Yeah, this is not good at all.
Not getting a good report. So who's saying all these things about English cricket?
Right, it's an independent report that was commissioned by the England and Wales Cricket Board. So this is after the Asim Rafiq affair a few years ago. So basically, that was at Yorkshire. Now, they've issued now an unreserved apology to those who face discrimination in cricket. They've called it holding up a mirror to cricket, which is the name of the report. Whether they actually expect it to be quite as bad as it was, I don't know, because it really is. I mean, it's awful when you go through it. I think, well, is there any good part of this report? Well, the answer is no, and it just, the main point, structural and institutional racism continues to exist in the game. There's over 4,000 people that were spoken to in and around the game of cricket. Women are treated as subordinate to men at all levels of the sport, which is not good, and they did suggest that there should be a point where women will be on the same pay as men when it comes to the England cricket team, which makes perfect sense. The prevalence...
Except it doesn't make perfect sense.
Well, I think it does. I think it does, Eamonn, when it comes to the actual playing for England.
You mean your wage for playing for your country?
Correct.
Should be the same, right?
I do.
But I suppose everything that comes into play here, it's the same as women's football. If the TV audience isn't there, the TV companies don't want to pay the same or anywhere remotely near.
I agree with that.
They pay for the men's game. So I suppose it's basic economics sort these things out, and there is a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's demand, isn't it? And it's when you look at English football, and I don't think many people surely would disagree with that, to say that I know it's happened in America, whereas America in soccer, as it would be there, and they say that, you know, pay should be equal because in America it's as big, the women's game, as far as the men's game. So that makes sense. Yeah. But over here, it's demand. So it's how much money that game earns compared to the women's game.
There's a brilliant series on BBC iPlayer called Gods of Tennis.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of this features the work of people like Martina Navratilova, Billie Jean King, Chris Evert, in trying to equalise pay, Billie Jean King in particular, between women and men. And when you can see that, how entertaining women's tennis was in the 70s, 80s and 90s, I mean, the case is absolute there, absolute. And she did so much to get that equality brought alongside.
Billie Jean King did, of course, in the game against Bobby Riggs back in the early 70s, which was the, you know, man against woman game, the famous game that she won. So she's done a huge amount, obviously. But then when we talk at tennis, we talk about whether it's 5 sets or 3 sets. But as far as this is concerned, the other one, which is really interesting, that's reported, this is the prevalence of elitist and class-based discrimination in England when it comes to cricket. Now, I think they worked out, it's over about 50 to 60% of the England cricket team come from a public school system.
But is it taught in state schools? I mean, is it fair to...
Well, it was with me, but not to the extent that you would see it in public schools.
Isabel is absolutely right. This is like 80%, 90% of these cricketers come from private schools.
Yeah.
And if public schools aren't teaching the game, what can you do about that?
That's it. Yeah. I mean, that's it. It's where it begins. So it's very well being able to say, well, these are just posh boys that are playing cricket. Where does it begin? Is cricket actually in the schools? I mean, when I was a kid, it was there. But the thing is, then the equipment you would see... I mean, certainly wasn't at any public school. And then when you would play cricket against those, I mean, it was a different situation altogether. The cricket, the coaching. There's public schools that are not far away from where I live, whereas I know that the cricket coaches, there's ex-England players, there's people that played for Essex compared to what they have in other schools. So I think the numbers are, it's around 58%. 58% of cricketers that are actually playing for England and playing at the highest level went to a public school, whereas the actual amount of kids that go to public school is only 7. So that's obviously something that's got to change. Also, black cricket as well has been failed. They say many who experience discrimination don't report it because, again, of distrust in authorities. It goes on. So it really is a damning report on
cricket. And it was based on the interviews with 4,000 people. So, I mean, this is a widespread criticism, effectively, of the sport.
And you know, they're just putting their hands up, the authorities, and saying, OK, we apologise, but they've got a big job. They've got a lot that they've got to do to try and then turn this around. So this is out this morning.
OK, the boxer Conor Benn, he's facing up to a 2-year ban He was charged by UK anti-doping for 2 positive drug tests, leading to the cancellation of his bout with Chris Eubank in London. What are the developments on that one?
So the developments on that, when we look back and we saw he was banned and everybody's up against him and saying what a disgrace it was. And now, a couple of months ago, we spoke about this drug clomiphene, which is a female fertility drug. And you think, well, why would you be taking that? You know, how could that end up in your system? Well, it then turns out that clomiphene is used by hens to get them to lay more. I mean, what came here first? Is it Connor or is it the egg?
The chicken or the egg.
Exactly. So the hens had clomiphene, which would then go through into the eggs. And Connor Ben, as part of his training, would eat a lot of eggs. A huge amount of eggs. And it seems that the new proof that's come out is that it's food contamination that has come out in this drugs test, not oral ingestion. In other words, it's gone into the eggs and it's gone through that way. So it seems likely that there's proof and then he'll be able to fight again. But who would have thought?
So that's going his way.
It looks like it.
Who would have thought? God knows what we're eating, what we're being given, and all sorts of hormones pumped into animals and in our drinking water and whatever, and we end up consuming it all. So
I think it's banned in this country. I mean, when it comes to feeding animals. I'm going way off from the sport here. I've had to look very deeply into this.
So
into Europe.
European eggs he's eating.
Those European clomiphenic eggs, that's what it is, yeah. I'll tell you what, though, it helps you fight well. but you're just not allowed to if you take any. But anyway, it looks like, hopefully, if it's true and if that's the reason, he'll be cleared and he'll be OK to fight.
OK, so let's look at some of the transfer situations in the Premier League.
OK.
Harry Maguire, Gareth Southgate's giving him a big hint that, you know, you've got to get out of Man United if you want to retain your England place. Declan Rice, a lot of interest. I thought it was a done deal, Declan Rice going to Arsenal, but...
Yeah, well, this is... It's turning into like Holmes under the hammer here between Manchester City and Arsenal. So Arsenal have bid £75 million. That's been turned down. It literally is an auction now. So now Manchester City have come in, 80 million plus 10 million add-ons, and there's always these add-ons, you know, like how many appearances, how many goals. So now we expect Arsenal to come back in, but the bottom line is West Ham will want £100 million plus. So then
does
it's
the
due to
player
Arsenal.
decide or does the club decide?
Well, you know, it's a tricky one because it's got to be on the terms of the player. The player's got to be happy, but then when you've got huge money like that, they'll be saying, look, I'm sorry, we're going to be selling you up there. I don't think it's going to... But the player has to be happy in the situation also. I think it will be worked out, but it's just where is the big money going to come from? Which one is it going to go to? And is it going to go over the £100 million?
That's it. That's the question. What else have you got?
James Maddison.
Yeah.
60 million, possibly to Spurs. There's the talk of whether he goes to Newcastle.
I think he'd be a good buy.
He would be a perfect Spurs player. But again, they've gone in with that first offer, it seems, which is 40 million. So, OK, we're 40 million. OK, no, we want this. So the auction's going on there. There's Harry Kane. There's talk about Harry Kane. Now possibly on a move to Bavaria, that he could end up going to Bayern Munich, which I don't know, I truly believe is likely to happen. Bayern Munich are very interested. Thomas Tuchel says he wants him, but everybody wants him. And another one is that Roy Hodgson, our great friend Roy Hodgson, 75-year-old Roy Hodgson, is on holiday. I don't know if it's a saga holiday, but he is on... I'm so sorry, Roy. I didn't mean it. I know he doesn't like that.
He's fighting fit. How cheeky, running across the pitch.
I know, but, yeah, I feel bad. Roy's a great guy, and I spoke to him on here, and he is going to be at Crystal Palace, it looks like, next year. So
he's going to do another year.
So he's going to do another year. But he loves it. That's what he lives for. And, you know, I spoke to him when he'd retired, and... You could see he was, like, just desperate to get back into football. Went back to Watford, back to Crystal Palace, which is his first love. So he'll be there for another year, I think.
You're defined by what you do, and if you're completely compos mentis and able-bodied and whatever, and you're not doing anything, it's a big void in your life.
It is a big void. Of course it is, with anything. But someone that is so involved in football, and it's something he truly loves, and to be out of it, it's like, you know, just get me back in there. And when you can still do it at the highest level like he can at the age of 75, you know, why the hell not? So good luck to him. He did really well at Crystal Palace at the end of the season last year.
Mr. Paul, thank you very much indeed.
You.
Fascinating stuff.
Thank you.
Cheers. Paul Coyne.
Thanks, Isabel.
Stay with us. Up next, the papers. We'll be talking about bank bosses being told to keep high street branches open. We'll be going through them with Andy Jones and Nicola McLean next.
like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
So there we are. The time is 25 to 7 o'clock, and we're going to bring you up to date with the front pages. What way are they looking, Isabel?
Well, here's the Times. It's carrying the words of Vladimir Putin that Russia shall not choke in bloody strife, as he called for mutineers to be punished.
Yeah, we thought they'd all kissed and made up. The Telegraph focuses on the leader of the Wagner group, who claimed that he could have taken Ukraine in a day.
The Express says bank bosses have been urged to keep high street branches open to help customers during the cost of living crisis.
And the Mail leads on Stephen Lawrence's father blaming the Metropolitan Police for their failures relating to his son's murder after a 6th suspect was named.
And the Sun is reflecting on the ongoing Nicola Bulley inquest, which has found that the 45-year-old mum died seconds after she ended up in the River Wire.
Let's go through these. We do that in the company today of Nicola McLean and Andy Jones with their take on what they see there. Good to see both of you. And Andy, first of all, Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner group, the Wagner chief. And what do you make of the way this is playing out? It was all supposed to be kiss and make up and everything was rosy in the garden. So then Prigozhin disappears and Putin's lambasting him. I mean, this man obviously has a price on his head now.
Yeah, look, it's funny how murderous villains who weren't friends last week, funnily enough, aren't friends this week. So Evgeny Prigozhin, who's the leader of the Wagner group, who led this coup on Russia at the weekend. The coup was then put down. Evgeny Prigozhin's now in hiding or been allowed, depending on who you believe. He's now in Belarus. Various other figures of Wagner are now in Belarus, where Putin has said, actually, yes, you can stay there, but whether or not we believe that. Evgeny Prigozhin isn't letting it lie either. Head of Wagner Group has said he could have taken Ukraine in a day. Obviously, we're into multiple years now of the Ukraine war. Russia invaded. They all thought it was going to be over in a day. Prigozhin has been saying his coup, or a failed coup, showed that it was a masterclass in launching an invasion, because Putin didn't even know it was happening. He managed to march however many thousand men into Russia without any fallout, and he said he ended the coup because he didn't want any bloodshed. And it was only supposed to be a protest rather than a coup.
Yes, well, that was the point, because he also made a statement yesterday, didn't he? A grainy voice statement on Telegram, saying this wasn't a coup, I wasn't trying to topple the Kremlin, this was simply about trying to point out the many errors in the Russian military leadership. So directly at the head of the defence unit, Gerasimov, and who's the other guy I'm trying to think of? Shoigu, who seems to have the backing of Putin in all of this, even though he really did show them how it should have been done.
Yeah, he did, yeah. Not many protests involved tanks and armed weapons, but they were marched up and down. Apparently there was supposed to be disputes of there were 25,000 men in this protest, but Ben Wallace, our Defence Secretary, has said there was only 2,500. We've gone from sort of the excited reports on sort of Friday and Saturday that Russia was about to fall, and now it was a sort of small armed protest, and the combatants have left to various different parts of Belarus. But yes, Putin has allowed Wagner to escape to Belarus, and even some of them apparently are allowed to go home to their nearest and dearest and not have to fight in the conflicts anymore.
I just think, what sort of world is it, Nicola, where you can hire a private army? You know, this Wagner group, they're fighting in Africa, they're fighting in Ukraine, whereas somewhere else there are.
They
do
were
all
in Syria.
They do.
Syria, they're criminals. They went into the prisons of Russia, didn't they?
But you can hire a really well-equipped army. You know, it's like hiring a bouncy castle for your birthday or something, you know?
It's terrifying, isn't it?
It is incredible. Let's move on now to the High Street, and this is an interesting one. I don't know about your High Street, but we have funeral directors, nail bars...
Estate agents,
sandwich shops...
Charity shops.
Betting shops.
Charity shops.
Endless charity shops, betting shops.
Yeah, so the High Street...
Coffee shops.
Nothing useful like a bank.
There's absolutely no doubt about it. So the banks and post offices and things like that are integral to gathering people together. What's the latest here?
Absolutely. So bank bosses are being urged to keep the branches open to help customers in the cost of living crisis. Branches are about more than just cash and accounts, isn't it? It's like, you know, older people, vulnerable people. They're saying that branches are closed down from 10,000 in 2015 to 5,000 now. Most people under 55 own a smartphone, slightly more over 65. So they're saying that people are choosing to do online banking, and because people aren't going into the branches, they need to adapt. But I really feel like we do need the branches. I feel like a lot of people can't do online banking, and just being able to go in and speak to someone, it would help a lot of people.
Let me tell you, I go into our High Street to go to the chemist shop. Where else do I go to? I go to...
Barbers.
The barbers, yes, that's a very good point. You know, there'll be a grocery shop or whatever. There's not a lot that attracts me there. But when I go, people say, "Hi, Eamonn, how you doing? How's your wife? How's this? How's that? How's the kids?" And I end up having a conversation with so many different people I didn't know I knew, and you come away, and that's called community.
Absolutely. I feel like it's so important. I've debated this on shows before, even, you know, supermarkets getting rid of actual cashiers and having you know, the scan as you go. I'm not interested in doing scan as you go, and, you know, I'm 41. So I'm not old, but I'm not really young. I want to speak to someone. I want to say, is it busy? The normal, they probably get it by everybody that comes through, but I want to chat. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's really important to keep things open, and it's sad. You know, I live in a small village, there isn't a bank, but the next village that's a bit bigger, both banks are closed. You have to go far and wide if you want to go and pay anything in. Or
the thing I think, Andy, that councils get wrong right from the start is to penalise drivers. Instead of facilitating cars and facilitating areas for people to park and making visiting the High Street easier, they penalise people, and I think that's completely in reverse to what they should be doing.
Absolutely. In London, you can't. It's no-go for cars. It's central London, but particularly around the country, it's expensive to park. There's nowhere to park, and yet the buses aren't running either, and the trains aren't regular either. And it's sort of like support your local high street. And it's, well, I've got a plan almost with military precision how I'm going to get there, how I'm going to get back, where I'm going to park, what train I'm going to get. Trains cancelled, buses are cancelled, and it becomes so expensive that people stop going.
The scary thing, just you said something which reminded me there. What are they doing in high streets now? They are closing down pubs, they're closing petrol stations, they are building these, they're making apartments out of all of these, so you can get as many senior apartments that you want. But I keep thinking, so what do you do when you get an apartment in this high street and there's no shops?
You stay in.
And, you stay in.
Don't go out the house.
Yeah.
Staying on a screen.
It is very frustrating.
Delivered to the door, and we're all in a loneliness crisis.
The other thing with banking, which Nicola said, is a lot of older people, a lot of other people, they don't have the time to sit on the phone for an hour waiting to speak to someone at the bank. And the other thing is, if you ring up and you've got a specific query of something, it will say, well, what department do you want? Well, very often you don't know what department you want because it's quite a complicated query, and then you find it maddening. You're just stuck in this circle of hell, going round and round and round, speaking to different sort of automated AI voices or a call centre abroad.
At the end of the day yesterday, my secretary, she was really forlorn looking. I said, what's wrong with you, Nicola? And she said, I can't take being told to hold on another call. You don't know how many of these that I've done, and they play music. We care about your call's important to us.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Oh, I know.
No, it's not. If it was important, they'd have somebody answering it.
So it's so frustrating, as you say. And, you know, press 1 for this, and then you press 1 and it's not what you need. So you have to go back and hear it again. And, you know, we do need face-to-face interaction.
But we tolerate it. We listen to the rubbish from the banks. People want to do online. No, you're making us do online. Therefore, when you do it, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
If we all wanted to do online, why is it when you go into the bank there's a 25-minute queue? Well, if there was no, it would be a desert. There would be no one in there. But they are all busy. You go in there, you can't get an appointment, you can't see.
My local bank's become a kitchen showroom now.
That's more useful. Get 11 kitchens in your house, Eamonn, going off all the way up the road. You don't need banking.
Andy, let's talk about the front of the Mail, the Stephen Lawrence story, all these years on, all this internal review of the Met Police, and still they're being exposed in the most depressing way, frankly. What's Stephen Lawrence's father saying about it all?
So this is Dr. Neville Lawrence, and he's been saying that this is absolutely appalling. So there's whatever you think of the Lawrence case and the coverage of it, it's incredible that we're still finding that there are new suspects. So there was explosive details announced yesterday that there was a 6th suspect in this murder, the murder of Stephen Lawrence at a bus stop in 1993 in London. What new information has come about is a BBC documentary has looked at a 6th suspect. Initially, this is a Matthew White who is since deceased. He died in 2021 of a drugs overdose. He was initially a witness in the case. And he was seen as a witness for the prosecution. And this BBC investigation has uncovered actually that a relative of his thought he was involved in the murder. Other witnesses thought he was involved in the murder. And so obviously the Lawrence family have this absolute torment of 2 of the suspects, two of them were convicted of the murder. 3 of them are still out on the streets and, of course, pledged their innocence. But he's obviously discussed how appalling it is that all of these years on, all of these initial investigations.
No, yeah, that's the sad thing about all of this. But that's the big BBC investigation available on iLine to watch there. Nicola, let's talk about skin cream brand, and it is so good. It's got a waiting list of how much?
30,000 people. Let me just get the, if I can quickly find it. Sorry, I thought I was doing one. So they're saying that it's cost nearly £500 for a 100ml bottle of this cream.
Oh my gosh.
And it's got fans like Victoria Beckham and Gwyneth Paltrow, which is why people want to use it. I'm shocked with the cost of living crisis that people can afford £500 for face cream. I wash my face with soap and water. I do not buy into any of this. I'm like, this is crazy to me. So,
do we know what's supposed to be in it? They always have horrible ingredients, these kinds of magic creams.
This company, is it Lima or Lima? They're known for doing laser treatment. So this is their first ever cream. So we don't even know if it's any good. So, but already, and the sort of ambassador for it said that she thought a couple of people might want it, but 30,000 people on the waiting list.
Wow.
Yes.
Would you buy it?
Well, no, I don't have to. You see, I have this philosophy that I believe eating is very good for your skin. Because the bigger your face is, there are no wrinkles on a balloon. You see, that's what I reckon. And that just, you see, if I was thin or slim, I would be, what's the word?
Haggard.
Haggard is the very term, haggard. So I believe in plumpification, keeping my face plumped.
I don't know. You know, I used to be sceptical of all these creams. My mum's a great believer in natural beauty, but through this job, I've been exposed to lots of incredible products and actually seen how things do work. And just this morning, my makeup artist put a cream that tightened and got rid of the puff a bit under my eyes. I saw it happening in the mirror.
It
just a cream that magically helped my eyes. So I do believe that some of these creams out there can
Could I
really
rub that on
help.
my tummy? would it help?
Possibly.
The
It doesn't
skin?
last long. It's just a few hours, but it helps with tired eyes.
They're saying with this cream, right, so if you use it morning and night, it will last for 30 days. So that will actually be a cost of £5,500 a year for this cream. Just get Botox. That's what I do. Soap and water and Botox. It works.
There we go.
Okay. Quick word about burgers, Andy. The Star are talking about burgers should be banned from the barbecue. Why?
Some celebrity chef that I've personally never heard of, and perhaps you've never heard of either, David Chang, has said that grilling a beef burger over an open flame is a grease fire waiting to happen, and it's disgusting. And the only reason why that we like beef burgers is because it's nostalgic and it's the done thing, when actually beef burgers, to the refined palate like Mr. Chang, are actually disgusting and not very nice. He said the only thing you should put on a burger, he said the only thing you should put on a barbecue is a corn on the cob, which is astonishing to me.
Yeah, I do love a corn on the cob.
I know, but the only thing you should put on a barbecue...
I love everything. To be honest, I love everything barbecued. Everything should be barbecued, from fish to
even skin cream.
halloumi, skin cream. Maybe that's the key.
But it's a fantastic feeling when your burger erupts in flame.
It's exciting.
I think
it's very interactive.
On Instagram, I saw someone putting burgers on the barbecue the other day with a cube of ice in the middle.
Yes,
to keep it moist.
To keep it moist, yes, I've seen this.
You know, dry
You
out the
should
meat.
try that with your face as well.
Yeah, put some ice on there.
Ice for the puffiness.
Guys, thank you very much
you
indeed. Andy and
both. See you
Nicola will be
again.
back in 40 minutes' time.
Right, the time is coming up to 10 to 7. Let's bring you up to date with today's top stories.
The Foreign Secretary has renewed the UK's backing for Sweden's bid to join NATO. James Cleverly will visit Sweden this week and insists that accession must happen as soon as possible to make us all feel safer.
Matt Hancock is to appear before the COVID-19 inquiry today as hearings continue into government preparedness for the pandemic. The former Health Secretary was one of the politicians who steered the coronavirus response before being forced to quit in June 2021.
Labour will force a vote in the House of Commons today on their proposals to ease the mortgage crisis. Just after 9, we'll speak to the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, that's Pat McFadden, about Labour would do to help homeowners.
Now, a jumper that was worn by Princess Diana is predicted to sell at auction for up to £70,000.
Well, you may remember this one. There it is. Red and white sheep. And is there black sheep
There's
amongst
one
it?
little black sheep in the middle, yeah.
In the middle. But would that not be seen as racist or something offensive nowadays?
Well, I don't know. I think perhaps there was a hidden message in it all, but we'll get into that with Kinsey. But this jumper, this very famous jumper, been lost for decades, hasn't it? And it's going to be offered for the first time in New York at Sotheby's in September.
I want to know. I was asking today. So who's putting it up for sale? Who was it lost to?
Yeah.
Who
Whose
found
attic was it in?
Whose attic did I find? Suddenly this could be worth £60,000 to £100,000. Royal and Showbiz reporter Kinsey Schofield. Let's go to her live. What?
Is that the one?
What is this you've got?
This is a warm and wonderful. They make copycats of it. This is like the one Emma Corrin wore in The Crown. And you know what? You guys came to the right person, because I've got it in vests. I've got it in chicken. I've also got it in reindeer for Christmas. There's a little black reindeer on there too. I am your girl. But no, royal fans are freaking out about this, Isabel and Eamonn, because this is one of those items that really we identify with Diana. We identify her as this fashion icon. I'd say it's revenge dress, then the black sheep sweater, then maybe the wedding dress or the Travolta dress she wore at the White House. But it's so important to royal watchers because it's a way that Diana told us quietly that she might not feel like she fit in. And there were actually 2 of these. A friend gave her her first jumper, and she accidentally tore it with her giant engagement ring from Prince Charles at the time. So she wrote Warm and Wonderful and asked them if they might repair it for her. And instead of repairing it for her, they actually gave her a brand new jumper.
Crikey, imagine ripping a jumper with your diamonds. I wonder if Kate has the same problem, because she has the same ring, doesn't she? This is fascinating. So you actually think that Diana was communicating how she was feeling. So the idea with this jumper, what, she was the black sheep of the family.
Yeah, I mean, that is what she later said, that she felt like she didn't fit in. And that was the way that she quietly told the world through her wardrobe.
Gosh.
Oh, maybe Meghan will bid for it. Oh, yeah.
I have already thought about that. Boy, oh boy, have I already thought about that. I don't, with Netflix and everybody pulling back, though, I don't know if she's got the 80 grand.
Okay. Yeah.
True story.
That's a good point, yeah.
Listen, you know, what is happening in Sotheby's, obviously it's happening in September and in New York. Are there lots of royal watchers like you in the States that you think are going to cough up for this?
I do. I mean, obviously, I'm going to have to sell a body part if I want
Don't do it,
I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to do that. But I think that we would at least hope that it would go to, because like you said, this was found in Warm and Wonderful, one of the owners, their attic, because they sent her a brand new one. They held on to the old one and totally forgot about it. So I think the hope is that someone will purchase it that will allow us to enjoy it too, so that we can get a sneak peek of it in real life and see this sweater that she was so in love with that she wanted it repaired. She didn't want to toss it. She wanted to make sure that it stayed a part of her wardrobe. And it really, truly, it just is one of those things that we think of Diana, we think of this sweater, we think of her youth, we think of her innocence. It's such a beautiful piece of history.
Well, and have you ever bid for anything at auction, Kinsey, or do you have any memorabilia, any famous memorabilia from someone?
Only Isabel is going to care about this. I have a dress owned by Kris Jenner, and I have a purse owned by Kourtney Kardashian.
Wow, that's really cool. I love how they sell their stuff all the time. You can get your hands on that.
Yeah.
I went to bid for John Wayne's toupee from True Grit and an eye patch. And my wife told me that she was going to leave me. I should have taken her up on the offer if I was going to buy those. The toupee was a bit mouldy, I have to say. But it would have looked... Fill your hands, you... Oh, can't say that line.
No, don't.
Yeah.
But I just don't personally see the need when you can do a Kinsey and you can have a chicken version, a tank top version, and the replica jumper. Yeah. Why spend 80 grand on the original? But anyway, we don't know the answer to whose attic it was found in, do we? Where's this jumper?
No, it was the owner of Warm and Wonderful, the creators of the jumper.
Right, we got that.
There was an exchange made when Diana asked them to repair the original. They kept the original, made her a brand new one.
And this is up for grabs, Sotheby's, New York, as I understand it, yeah?
That's right, September 7th. I'm taking donations. I'm willing to marry the person that's willing to buy it for me. We'll see.
Well, you can begin to save up. Thank you very much indeed, Kinsey Schofield, the one and only. Thank you very much.
Stay with us. We're going to have more for you on that fragile truce between Putin and the leader of the Wagner Group as the UK government confirms it's looking at all scenarios.
OK, let's get the forecast on this Tuesday. Let's see how it's looking. Alex Deakin.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. A bright start for some out there this morning, but generally quite a cloudy day, rain across parts of the north. Much of the south will stay dry thanks to this area of high pressure, but it's being squeezed away thanks to this area of low pressure that's already bringing outbreaks of rain across Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland and will continue to trickle its way eastwards through the day. So turning damp over parts of Wales and northern England at the moment. The rain will be on and off here through the day. The rain will spread into northeastern Scotland eventually after some early brightness, and a bright start to the day across East Anglia and the southeast, but it will cloud over here as we go through the day. Much of the south of England will stay dry, but staying fairly damp across southern Scotland. The rain may ease a touch in Belfast, allowing temperatures to rise to 21 Celsius. Generally in the high teens, where it's dull and damp further south, even though it's cloudy, we should get temperatures into the low 20s. Quite a misty, murky night to come tonight as well, particularly around western coasts. Further outbreaks of rain across eastern England and Scotland, but should tend to ease as we go through the second half of the night. So many places will become dry as we head into Wednesday. It will be a pretty warm night, however, so warmer than the night just gone, with temperatures holding up in the mid or even high teens in some locations. So a humid start to Wednesday. As I said, many places will start dry, but tomorrow morning, fairly quickly, I think we'll see some outbreaks of rain pushing back into Northern Ireland, and this line of rain could have some pretty heavy bursts mixed in as it comes across parts of Scotland, then into England and Wales later on. Now, most of the day across central and eastern England looks dry, and it should turn drier to the northwest and a little fresher here. But for England and Wales, quite a warm, humid feeling day with temperatures once more in the southeast, 25, maybe 26 Celsius. That humidity may spark some heavy thundery showers on this weather front before it clears through during Thursday, and the weather remaining pretty changeable with more low pressure systems coming in this week.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, the big green, my superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
Cracks appear in Russia's truce as Britain warns a mass evacuation of nationals would be impossible.
Hello there, very good morning. Good to see you. 7 o'clock on the dot. It is Tuesday, 27th of June. Breakfast here on GB News. Online, on TV, on radio. Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
And here's what's leading the news this morning. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly's warned that an airlift evacuation of British nationals from Russia in the event of civil war would be impossible, but that the government's looking at all scenarios.
It comes as the truce that halted the advance begins to fall apart, with Vladimir Putin vowing to punish the mutineers in a televised address. The leader of the Wagner group last night called the coup a masterclass in how to launch an invasion.
Former Health Secretary Matt Hancock will today become the first politician directly involved in the COVID response to face the pandemic inquiry.
Prince William has called for an end to the prejudice against rough sleepers as he announced a major 5-year plan to end homelessness. Launching the initiative yesterday, he visited housing and training projects in London, Bournemouth and Newport.
And do cheat days help or harm your diet? We'll be speaking to the weight loss guru who banks his calories to help with motivation.
And the sunshine, where's it going? Let's find out now with your latest weather.
Things have been clouding over overnight, a greyer day today compared to yesterday. There'll be some rain around as well, chiefly across the north. Join me later for a full GB News weather forecast.
On to our top story this morning, and an airlift evacuation of British nationals from Russia in the event of civil war would be impossible, according to the Foreign Secretary.
His comments came as the truce between Vladimir Putin and the leader of the Wagner group appeared to fracture. The Russian president calling for the organisers of the coup to be brutally punished. He did this on TV yesterday.
The organisers of the rebellion, betraying their country, their people, betrayed those who were lured into the crime. They lied to them, pushed them towards death, under fire, to shoot their own people. It was precisely this outcome, fratricide, that Russia's enemies wanted. Both the neo-Nazis in Kiev and their Western masters, and all sorts of national traitors. They wanted Russian soldiers to kill each other.
Well, you can see how angry that address was. Well, it also followed a message from the mercenary leader Prigozhin in which he called his advance on Moscow a masterclass and said that the Russian public were actually disappointed when he stopped.
In America, Joe Biden has spoken overnight, addressing Putin's accusations that the West was involved in the mutiny.
I also convened our key allies on a Zoom call to make sure we're all on the same page. It's critical that we're coordinated in our response and coordinated in what we to anticipate. They agreed with me that we had to make sure we gave Putin no excuse. Let me emphasize, we gave Putin no excuse to blame this on the West or to blame this on NATO. We made clear that we were not involved. We had nothing to do with it. This was part of a struggle within the Russian system.
OK, so that's the way it's playing out. Joining us in the studio, political analyst Leon Emirali with this one. The thing that's getting me, Leon, is that, you know, Saturday or so, it was all kiss and make up. We're all friendly. It's all a bit of a misunderstanding here. Whoa, and the steam is now coming out of Putin's ears.
Yeah. Well, he's seen, Eamonn, that he's vulnerable and that actually there could have been something quite serious happening in Russia had Prigozhin and the Wagner group decided to continue with that attempted coup, whatever you want to call it, whatever it was. But I think what it has proven is that Russia is fractured. Russia is not united in the way that Putin would hope they are behind him and behind the war effort. And I think he has become vulnerable for the first time. He's seen it, that actually his power is very, very fragile, and he's come out all guns blazing, as you'd expect, and promised to take down the people behind it. But, you know, Prigozhin is a very dangerous and powerful man, as we've seen, so I don't think it's straightforward.
So where does it leave Prigozhin? Where is he going hiding? Interesting that his statement was released. No camera work involved in it. It was an audio-only type thing. So we don't know, is he in Belarus? Who's protecting him? Where can he go? Where is he going to be safe around the world? Because that, to me, sounds as if Putin is saying there's a price on your head now and you're going to pay for this.
Well, look, it's very murky. I think the reports are that he is in Minsk, the capital of Belarus. That's where he's sort of in exile, as it were. But we've seen the Russian state do not take lightly to this type of thing. And whether you are away from the Russian motherland, as it were, you are still a target. We've seen it in this country where spies or intelligence personnel have been killed in this country from Russian assassins. So, look, if I was Prigozhin, I would be looking over my shoulder and sleeping with one eye open, because I don't think he's necessarily in a safe haven.
I suspect both of them are probably doing that. I don't imagine Putin is sleeping easily, not least because Prigozhin challenged the narrative for the first time. We heard that he believed the invasion of Ukraine was set about on a false pretense, this idea that NATO and Ukraine were in some way a threat, which he said was just complete rubbish.
Yeah, and this is, I think, is what's interesting about this story, Isabel, is the fact that it's coming from within. It is literally coming from this mercenary group that was fighting for Russia. And I think that's, for the first time, that's really happened, where we've seen that dissent from within Russia, and it can't just be blamed on the West. I'm sure Putin is about to come out and say, actually, it was the West that were leading this, but Joe Biden denies it, and I think that's right for him to do.
Well, I think it was interesting over the weekend. You could see that the Russians were trying to block a lot of Western news sites, because obviously they don't want the Russians to understand the true picture. Hearing Prigozhin say that will possibly have planted a seed in the minds of ordinary Russian civilians. And I suppose the question now will be, if the Wagner mercenaries do decide to join the Russian army or go home to their Russians, then Putin can rest easy. But if they feel they have the support of Russian people, as Prigozhin is hinting, that could be a totally different game altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is such a fragile situation, because if you're one of those fighters that was part of this 24-hour coup and suddenly you're downing weapons for the Russian state and working for Wagner, and then the next minute you're told, actually, switch again, where does that leave you and your credibility if you're just a fighter on the ground?
They go with the money, don't they? And that is the whole. Prigozhin relies on money, and big money. And the question was, did Putin actually pay him off at the weekend? Because to keep that private army going, and we believe up to 50,000 soldiers within it, and the equipment that they have, they took on Russian Air Force at the weekend. They shot down planes, they shot down attack helicopters as well. That requires money, that requires big bucks.
Huge bucks. I mean, you consider any military spending is massive, but to do it from a supposedly private organisation is unthinkable, really. So I think there is money at play here. This guy is a mercenary. He's not doing this for the good of the cause. He's doing this for the good of his back pocket. And, ultimately, that makes him very, very dangerous, because he can be bought by various different groups, and who knows where that could lead to. But Putin has clearly got his back up because of this, and I think that's dangerous as well. And we are, again, at a very dangerous, very worrying tipping point in Russia, because this could spill over, this could become more and more serious.
Well, exactly, and I suppose it was interesting hearing the Prime Minister yesterday saying that Britain needs to prepare for the possibility that Russia could implode. We understand that diplomats are hastily preparing for all different outcomes, and the Foreign Secretary making it very clear that those few thousand British people, civilians or whoever they might be, who are in Russia, cannot expect any sort of evacuation if civil war does erupt.
Yeah. What are they doing there anyway?
Well, there's journalists. They might be married to Russians.
This is like, Nazi being at war with Nazi Germany. Would we all go and sit and camp up in Berlin? I don't think so.
Well, lots of Western journalists are there doing important work.
Well, the fact is, people are there, and the British state has the responsibility for them if there was to be some sort of military confrontation with Russia. And the fact that James Cleverly's come out and said, actually, we can't rescue you, you're going to be left alone.
Yeah.
OK, we can question their judgment, but there'll be lots of government workers out there. There'll certainly be intelligence officers out there, as well as journalists, as well as others working for Russian companies who are just going to be innocent bystanders in all of this. So this is going to be a very murky situation if there was to be a civil war within Russia, or any unrest within Russia beyond what we're currently seeing.
Well, Leon, let's hear the views now of Rob Clark. He's Defence and Security Analyst of Civitas. And he joins us now from the USA. Rob, good morning to you. Thanks for your time this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Hey, well, what sort of position are we in now? Where is all of this at with Prigozhin and Putin? How much do they hate each other?
There's going to be a fair amount of animosity between the two former allies, that's for sure. We've seen tracking link on Lifetime Aviation online, where Prigozhin's private jet has landed in Minsk, around about an hour and a half ago in the early hours. So he's in Belarus now, presumably the hospitality of Belarus dictator Alexander Lukashenko. And we've already seen last night President Putin almost going back on his so-called deal with Prigozhin. One of the terms was he was going to not investigate Prigozhin for mutiny or for enacting revolution, but he's already still describing Prigozhin as a mutineer, accusing him of treason. So the fact that he's already still labelling Prigozhin in these very harsh terms for Prigozhin's sake, this shows that really we've not seen the end of this, and it's going to antagonise Prigozhin even further. He's only in Belarus, which is obviously a doorstop away from Russia, and indeed a vassal state of Moscow, and he still retains control of around 30,000 Wagner fighters loyal to him in southern Russia and eastern Ukraine. So it's a highly volatile situation still.
Do you buy the defence that Prigozhin put out yesterday, that it wasn't an attempt at a coup, it was more a criticism of the leadership on the military front, whether it was Gerasimov, the chief of staff, or Shoigu, who's in charge of defence? I mean, if you were Putin, you could have just got rid of those guys and brought in Prigozhin, because he's such a dangerous man, and put him at the top of the Russian military, seeing as they've been so poor at carrying out what his orders, effectively.
Well, I mean, both Shoigu and Gerasimov have been poor. There's no doubt about that. But replacing them, both his chief of staff and the minister for defence, would look incredibly weak politically by Putin at this stage in the conflict. For his own political survival, he really needs to keep those two key allies of his in post. Replacing Prigozhin wouldn't really solve that. Prigozhin himself doesn't really have great contacts with the current military leadership, although former Russian military officials he does, which is one reason why we didn't see the Wagner fighters really come under much attack on their march to Moscow over the weekend. But no, keeping Gerasimov and Shoigu in place really helps Putin solidify his control internally just as much as it does the Russian effort in Ukraine, as poor as that is.
And our judgment may be very poor as well, Rob. We're sitting here. Who is the greater evil, Putin or Prigozhin?
Oh, it's the lesser of two evils, without a doubt. If you look at which is worse for the war in Ukraine, for instance, and the stability of Europe, there's nothing really between them. The only difference really is obviously Putin is the commander-in-chief of Russian forces. He makes all the final decisions in Russian political life. So, evidently it's Putin. By sidelining Prigozhin in Belarus, he's basically completely, removes Wagner forces from the fight, at least short-term, in Ukraine. But it's important to note that really Wagner are only being used sparingly in offensive actions by Russian forces. Russia's priority now is obviously in defence. They're trying to defend against the Ukrainian counter-offensives, and Wagner forces aren't really used in this way. So for the next few months at least, they were going to be sidelined anyway. And this is one reason why Prigozhin took the desperate action that he felt he had to. It wasn't really a coup or a military revolt. It was seen as an act of desperation by Prigozhin, to keep his business enterprise flourishing.
Just a final thought. Do you predict that the Wagner soldiers who've been offered contracts with the Russian army will take those up? Or will they take President Putin's offer of being welcomed home to their loved ones in response to walking away from Wagner? Or do you think they'll stay loyal to Prigozhin? Oh, the great suspense. We'll never know the answer to that
question. They might just follow the money, Leon. That's the thing.
I think that's what's going to happen here. These are people that ultimately can be bought, and that's what's worrying for Putin. He's thinking, is someone else going to come in and be able to take this private army on and be able to actually cause more issues for him? So it's not over yet.
Can I just ask you finally about NATO? The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, heading to Sweden. He is very much underlining his support for them acceding into the group. We also heard from the Defence Secretary yesterday ruling himself out as the leader. He said, not this year, not next year, or the year after. It's not a role for me.
Yes, so a big week for NATO. They've got their sort of annual conference and they'll be deciding on who leads the organisation. It's likely it will remain the incumbent, Jens Stoltenberg, who's former Norwegian Prime Minister. But Ben Wallace was after that job. It was rejected in many ways by the Americans, by Macron as well. And that's an issue for Ben Wallace, but he's still in post as Defence Secretary, of course, and maybe that's a long-term ambition of his. But the issue of Sweden joining NATO, I think, is an interesting one because America want them there, the UK clearly want them there, but there is some resistance from Turkey who believe that Sweden are actually harbouring terrorist groups, pro-Kurdish terrorist groups, that will potentially be a stumbling block for them joining. But given the UK and the US and the other allies are pushing for Sweden to join, I think it's likely we'll see them join alongside Finland, who joined earlier in this year. And it's formed this ring where around Russia, effectively, where NATO has come closer to encroaching on their borders, exactly the opposite of what Putin wants.
OK, Leon Emirali, and our thanks to Rob Clark as well. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. 7:15. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. The chair of the Independent Commission for Equity in Cricket, Cindy Butts, said she encountered horrific stories in her report which investigated racism, sexism and misogyny. Ms Butts told the BBC that cricket culture in England and Wales is rotten, with the Commission making 44 recommendations.
The government's been urged to rule out detaining or forcibly removing children who are seeking asylum to Rwanda. A new report published by the Women and Equalities Committee raises concerns about what they call the unnecessary risks to vulnerable people. And we'll be speaking to the committee's chair, Caroline Noakes, at about 8:15.
School uniforms are still not affordable to most families, despite changes introduced last year aimed at keeping costs down. The Children's Society found that on average, parents and carers are spending £422 for secondary student uniforms, £287 on primary school children. £287 to kit your kid out for primary school in a uniform. I mean, I'm a great believer in uniforms, but I think they've got to come to an agreement that it doesn't have to be the official clothier for the school, which can really ramp the costs up. So you get the colours right, or the, that as long as you get the uniform as such right. Maybe you shouldn't have to get the official supplier's version.
I went to a school as a child where we had to wear all the blazers and all the gear, and I remember my mum buying them sort of 4 sizes too big so that it would last us all the way through. But my kids go to a school, the local state school, and I have to say the uniform is cheap as chips. You can get most of it from the supermarket, mass-produced probably from China or something. And I do think that's really great. And there's very little repercussions with the school if perhaps they're not wearing regulation shoes or regulation hairbands, because it is a great leveller for those children that don't have a lot, especially at the moment. And the kids, they still look smart, but they don't have to break the bank.
Well, when I was at primary school, there was no such thing as a uniform there. Never noticed I had to have one or didn't have to have one. We just turned up in whatever clothes that you had. Didn't realise it was an issue. At secondary school, it was a big thing. I mean, particularly in sport. If you used to turn up, we had to wear white socks with a black, white and green stripe on the turn down of the socks. And if you went with all white socks or something different, the PE teacher would just say, "Where's your college socks, boy? Where's your college socks?" And then that was you. He wasn't American, but he went for a course in America and he came back.
Right, with a twang.
Yeah, and...
well, you'd be criticised. He'd be criticised for that because it would discriminate against the kids that don't have much money. And, sometimes some of the more expensive schools, I think, go a bit OTT on the uniforms. You have to have your rugby kit and you have to have your football kit, and they're identical, apart from one's a tiny bit thicker. And it absolutely is it's an absolute racket.
We couldn't have we had to have a certain type of bag. Certain realms were allowed, but you weren't allowed to have like canvas bags or with logos on them or anything like that. So it goes on and on and on. And I do think, as Isabel was saying there, a sense of uniformity is important because it does not discriminate. You haven't got
It's important, but it's not the be-all and end-all. And I think we can get a little bit too obsessed by it.
But you haven't got kids then, and kids are terrible with this, all kids. I don't care who your kid is, what background you're from. They want branded stuff. If it's not the brand,
logo,
they can sniff out an imposter, you know, at 10 paces type thing. So they're not going to settle for the supermarket-only brand.
Yeah, mine haven't reached that age, but I'm sure they will. Dreading it. Look, stay with us. After this, we're going to be asking if using cheat days is a good way to lose weight or if it just pushes us to make, therefore, unhealthy choices. Your thoughts welcome. Join us next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back at 7:24. Still to come on our programme this morning.
The cost of sending a migrant to Rwanda could be almost 170,000 quid. At 8:10, we'll ask the chair of the Women and Equality Select Committee why she's calling for children, though, not to be included on schemes like that.
As Britain's biggest retailers prepare to be questioned by MPs today over high costs, we'll bring you the latest shop price inflation figures.
and you'll know for yourself how bad that inflation is. Any discussion you want to get involved in, whether it's shop price inflation or mortgage crisis, mortgage deals, the latest in the Russian situation, please do get in touch. And you do that by gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GBNews. Okay, so if I hear another person saying, you say, would you like this, would you like that? No, I'm going on my holidays in 2 weeks' time. No, I've got a beach body to get ready and all that sort of thing. So a lot of people are embarking on what are called cheat days. So you can sort of eat what you want, but not when you want, sort of thing.
Yeah, so we're asking this morning whether or not cheat days are actually effective or useful when it comes to losing weight. Let's speak to weight loss coach Steve Miller. He says he's all for a cheat day and thinks it does help with your motivation.
Beside him, psychologist Dr. Omara Nassim, who says that cheat days can lead to binge eating, meaning people can develop harmful habits. And Doctor, I'd like to start with you. Apparently it's the way ahead. I mean, I'm opening up the papers today and they're saying if you want to lose weight, either fasting, where you eat during a certain window, or cheat days, that is the way ahead. Why do you disagree, Doctor?
I disagree based on the evidence that we know clinically as well, and linked with the relevant research, that having cheat days and coupled with restrictive eating is really harmful in developing binge eating patterns, emotional eating episodes, and lends itself to the black and white thinking and rigid and rule-driven eating that creates like a perfect storm for binge eating episodes. This isn't the case for everybody, but for the majority of people and people who are vulnerable to emotional eating episodes, this is actually quite harmful.
Interesting. But Steve, you actually think it could be a really useful tool and help people to, get a little bit of what they fancy every now and then?
Look, when people are losing weight, they're a bit fed up and depressed enough. Do you know what I mean? And the evidence from my perspective says the reverse, which is completely that if you feel you're in a straitjacket on a diet, you just want to break out of it. So I think the more constructive way forward is to live 80-20. So you're eating pretty well 80% of the time, and 20% of the time you're doing what I did last night, which is necking a bottle of wine down you. I mean, if we want to encourage people to lose weight, then, it is about motivation. And sustainable motivation is not delivered by restricting people, full stop. It just doesn't work.
But Steve, can you not undo all your good work by having a big binge? I mean, you could, be slavishly following really strict rules 80% of the time and then eat all of the calories that you've been missing out on in one go. A bottle of wine, probably not that helpful with weight loss.
Oh, God, man, you've got to enjoy your bottle of wine with a takeaway like I did last night. I necked every little bit of it, I tell you. But, you've got a point in that you don't want the treat days. I hate the word cheat, but I'll call it treat days. You don't want the treat days to overtake what you're doing. So you do have to have a sense of self-motivation. And what I say to people is, on a very practical level, if you find it's hard after a couple of cheat days to get back on the wagon, so to speak, start looking at your fat photo for a start, because that'll motivate you away from going backwards, yeah? Think about your children. Think about why you're doing it. Think about the purpose. Think about the end result consistently.
Scare the wits out of yourself, basically.
You've got to, absolutely. When we talk about motivation is a carrot and a stick. Everyone thinks it's about being nicey all the time. You've got to have both. And that would also include, for example, to get back on the wagon, start looking at the clothes. So when I eat a meal at night, if I want to get back on the wagon, I'll have an item of clothing sat in front of me that I want to fit back into, maybe. Something like that. So I've got the carrot and the stick all the way. But restriction, no. Do not restrict yourself.
Doctor, let's hear from you as to what you believe a healthy way at implementing lifestyle changes would be. If you're going to have a change, you don't believe in the gluttonous approach after a few days. What do you believe in?
Sure. I think ditch the feast or famine, ditch the all or nothing way of thinking, because that is quite disordered and can easily lead into set you up for long-term bad habits. What we need is good professional advice by people with the right credentials to be able to support you in making healthy lifestyle changes. So the best healthy eating plan is one that you can stick with long term. And health is holistic. We also need to think about our sleep. You know, are you sleeping well? Are you moving enough as well? Can you choose a type of exercise that you enjoy so you're going to stick with it? And then we make healthy choices based on nutrition. Am I putting good quality food into my body? And am I learning about nutrition? Am I cutting down on processed foods? And what are my goals? And how do I reach them in a realistic way? So we're looking at holistic lifestyle change. A person who wants to lose weight, the best will in the world, they can't do it if they're not sleeping well. They can't do it if they're not moving in the right way. So actually, long-term lifestyle changes that fit with the person's life need to be put in practice and put into place.
Well, just watch us two ballooning over the next 9 months or so. And actually, it gets worse when it gets into winter, when it gets darker and more depressing. And Isabel and I just talk about, you know, our lack of sleep and how often our sleep is disturbed by early morning starts and whatever it is. So we are aware. I mean, I've had doctors in the past tell me this job is killing you, you know, and I've done it for a number of companies over the years. But there's no doubt shift work is a difficult thing to deal with.
That's to me, yeah. I mean, shift work is a difficult thing to deal with, but it is about routine, Eamonn. And what we have to do is realise that the more you do something, the easier it becomes. So with people that work shifts, they do need to develop a routine. Again, living 80-20. The key here is to realise that the research actually suggests that diets are doomed. And that's what we're talking about. If you're saying never have a cheat day, we're talking about diets, and they just don't work. Diets make you dumpier. That's what happens, because you get so frustrated, it gets really boring as well. Diets can be really boring and also quite expensive for people.
But, you know, I was just going to ask Dr. Nassim a final thought, but I would just come back always when we talk about weight loss, when we talk about diets, to those in the Mediterranean, whether it be the French who live off croissants, butter, baguette, cheese, wine, or whether it be those, you know, on the med eating feta cheese, whatever. They don't do cheat days. They eat in moderation, and they seem to have life sussed. Is it a British problem that we can't seem to control our appetites? And that question to you, Dr. Nassim.
Okay. Sorry, I missed half of that question there because of my signal, but I caught the second half. So I agree with some elements of what Stephen's actually saying here, but the concept, I think, of a cheat is we shouldn't need to have something to cheat on. We should have a healthy pattern. Like you say, health is on a spectrum. We want to eat in a moderated way. So maybe actually there's some factors in Britain like lack of education. We're in the middle of a recession. It's easier for people to choose sort of junk food options or lower quality food options. I think education and awareness is actually something that's growing in schooling through much more wider access to things, and social media can be used in a helpful and a harmful way, but there's an argument for it also what kids have available to them to inform them now. And now that we're all better informed as a nation compared to 20 years ago about healthy eating, it starts at home and how we educate our children as well to make healthy choices, role modelling what we eat together. But moderation is key. We need to learn to have a healthy relationship with food all along the way, not just feast or famine or on a day when the implication is...
And just finally, Doctor, have you had breakfast? Do you eat breakfast? What are you going to have for breakfast? Or what have you had?
Yes. Of course I eat breakfast. I eat porridge oats with cinnamon and a banana. Nothing fancy.
And Steve, what about you? Anything fancy, or do you give it a miss?
Depends on the day. I'm intermittent fasting today because I stuffed my face last night.
Yeah, okay.
We haven't had anything, have we?
Not yet, but it's heavily on my mind.
Is it?
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Both.
Thank you very
Always
much indeed.
Interesting. Listen, let us know your thoughts, your experiences. If you've got the secret to weight loss, let us know, because as Eamonn says, that countdown to beach bodies is coming for us all.
No, I think I'll go up a mountain or something.
I've decided that the Victoria Beckham grilled fish, steamed veg diet is for me.
No, I've decided I need a chef. That's what I. if
That's
I
a
had,
good idea.
That would be the great extravagance
Yeah.
in life. I would have a chef at home. What are you having for breakfast, Mr. Holmes? What are you having for lunch? Absolutely
Wonderful.
amazing. Just good stuff.
Yeah.
Good stuff all the time. Take temptation away. Coming up to 25 to 8. Stay with us. We'll be discussing racism in the world of cricket and going through the papers with Andy Jones and Nicola McLean.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back at 7:38. Let's bring you up to date with today's front pages of the newspapers. Here's the Times. It's carrying the angry words of Vladimir Putin that Russia shall not choke in bloody strife as he called for mutineers to be punished. Here's the Telegraph. It's focusing on the leader of the Wagner Group instead, and he claimed he could have taken Ukraine in a day, called his march on the capital a masterclass. The Express says bank bosses have been urged to keep high street branches open to help customers during the cost of living crisis. The Mail's leading on Stephen Lawrence's father, blaming the Met Police for their failures relating to his son's murder after a 6th suspect was named. And finally, here's The Sun reflecting on that ongoing Nicola Bulley inquest, the family due to go today. Yesterday, we heard the 45-year-old mother of two had drowned seconds after she ended up in the River Wye. We're going inside the papers today with the writer and journalist Andy Jones and the TV personality Nicola McLean. Welcome back to both of you. Andy, we're going to start with The Guardian, and I have to say it's a lot of the news sites as well as their top story. This absolutely damning report into English cricket. Allegations of widespread and deep-rooted racism, sexism, elitism and class-based discrimination.
Absolutely. This is an independent report by the Commission for Equity in Cricket. This is a 320-page report. They found English cricket at all levels. This isn't talking about the England cricket team. This is absolutely across the board, guilty of every sort of ism and obia that you can think of. This was drawn from a study of 4,000 players, coaches, administrators of all ages, backgrounds, sexes and ethnicities. And they basically said that it's guilty of everything, and it's not just a few bad apples. This is across the board. This is village cricket. This is upwards. And one of the things they say is that particularly that women's cricket is treated as a second-class sport. Women are demeaned when they play cricket. There's a drinking, laddish culture in cricket that goes further than just a few bad apples. And we've had incidences where I think England cricketers were accused of different things in Yorkshire, and this report is particularly damning, and it goes into all sorts of things. 87% of Pakistani, Indian, Bangladeshi cricketers of that background that were interviewed said that they had suffered some sort of racism or a victim of it, 87%. What I will say, with these studies, if you ask somebody and said, have you ever suffered racism in a sport, or racism in the workplace, or sexism in the workplace, and they say yes, it's them saying that there is racism or sexism, they have experienced it. It doesn't necessarily mean that they think the whole industry is that. So they've drawn this conclusion based on a data and interview basis.
I suppose you could probably say that of most sports. It's just the fact that this particular sport has done this kind of look inside itself. Do you think in football there could probably be a lot of the same, perhaps not the class issue, but certainly you'd probably have a lot of racism and sexism in football?
Yeah, racism and sexism in football is rife, like massively. So I think absolutely, and obviously class a bit different, but I mean the abuse, the racism.
Graham Lasso used to say he suffered class abuse. Graham Lasso, the Chelsea bowler, yeah. I mean, he was different than the rest, and then he came from the Channel Islands and was from a different background and read broadsheet newspapers and received a lot of abuse for that, you know, so you just have to be different, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just see that the abuse that the young black footballers get if they miss a penalty, to know that it's just rife. I put it on my Instagram the other week, and so many people said to me that it's not racist anymore. It's changed. I'm like, oh my God, we've got so far to go. We really have.
No, one of the other points is that obviously class plays a huge part in cricket, and if you went to a fee-paying public school, you're significantly more likely to make it as a cricketer than at a state school, which also shows the lack of opportunity if you were at a state school.
You could say that about rugby, couldn't you?
And the head of the ECP has apologised profusely for all of these things, I should say, and he's going to root and branch investigation, etc., etc.
Advances in medical detection and screening. Nicola, this is all brought about by Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York. What's she calling for?
So obviously, terrible news, but the doctors are saying that it looks really good for her, so that's good news. But she's now said that she's going to make sure she uses this experience to get women aged 50 to 70 screened. I think it needs to be lowered. I mean, fantastic if she manages to do that. But I think the age needs to be lowered for screening. She said that she had no symptoms, so it quite often goes undetected. My mum had breast cancer. She's in remission, absolutely fine, thank God. But I think that it should be low, and it's worrying.
See, Andy, as a bloke, you and I don't wake up in the morning and feel our breasts, though apparently we should do, because it can happen to men as well, breast cancer. But as women, you guys, is this like a ticking time bomb with you? Is this now like prevalent in your life all the time? Is it a concern that you would have as women?
It's one of a long list of things I worry about, for sure. I mean, I don't know, did your mum find her breast cancer through routine screening? Or
no,
did she find a lump?
Through a lump. And I don't know whether it's one of those bury your head in the sand things. I don't feel. I should, and I really, but I think, oh God. So I think a screening is a must for me, because else I wouldn't know. I really wouldn't.
Yeah, I think the other terror is people not being able to take time off work to go and get a screening, to go and get assessed. People are, I'll put it off, and then suddenly you hear these horrible cases of somebody who's had their appointment cancelled lots and lots of times by clinics not having staff to do it, and then they've got stage 4, whichever, and it's very serious.
Nicola, I've heard awful reports about it being excruciating, and I mean the worst pain. My mum's went for one screen and she didn't go back again after that. They almost tried to flatten her boob in the mammogram.
They wouldn't be able to do that to me.
No, it could be dangerous though, you know? Yeah. And anyway, obviously that's not to be encouraged, but I do think the pain factor deters some people.
Well, it's the same as your smear tests. I mean, it's not that bad, you know, on the grand scheme of it. Even, you know, I've never had a mammogram. If they are painful, obviously, maybe that's, you know, if there's a way that we can look into making it more comfortable. But, you know, however long it takes to saving your life, you know, we really have to be, you know, we have to be sensible about it.
Andy, why is working from home bad for you? This is front page of The Times.
So The Times runs a story about working from home is leading to an increase in illness, and then people not even being able to work, can't even work from home because they're too ill. Apparently this is because social media-driven anxiety, people spending longer online looking at stuff, sends them a bit mad, and also the physical strain of working at unsuitable and uncomfortable desks. Perhaps we have a little bit of sympathy here. I know some of our chairs aren't always quite as comfortable.
Eamonn,
I know.
Poor Nicola.
But people work. It's the classic. People working at the kitchen table or on a you know, a cushion, whatever, on the couch or whatever, and then they get a serious back injury. The government is trying to fix this. It's giving people life coach. This is people who are signed off sick. It wants to give life coaches to people to help them either work better or work in an office. And this is costing us about £2,000.
Is it worse than going down the mines? You know, I just think you can find a fault in everything. Or what are we doing to ourselves as a people, as a society? What on earth are we inflicting on ourselves all the time, allowing to happen? Or you could look at this and say, for goodness sake, you know, get over it, deal with it.
Well, the government said they're spending money on life coaches for people to live a healthy living, £2,000 a time. But they're saying, well, if we'd rather spend £2,000 on giving someone advice and sorting their life out than spending however many £1,000 a year on them being long-term sick. But as you say, people still work in the mines, people stood on their feet all day, you know, on a factory floor, a conveyor belt, really hard manual work. And now we can't even sit at a kitchen and tap away at a laptop all day. I'm not saying that can't be stressful, but my word.
I do think social media-driven anxiety is real. And I'm increasingly... I wish my phone wasn't attached to my camera, because I think if I go on holiday or something, I genuinely just want to leave my phone behind. I don't want to read the news, I don't want to hear from anyone, but I do want to take pictures of my kids. So, and then I end up taking my phone, and then I end up, you know, posting them or this and the other.
I know when you put the limitations on being contacted or anything, but the first thing she does, she comes in here today and she's talking away to various people. You're doing it, and you are addicted to it.
I'm on my phone too much, but I don't think I have social media anxiety.
Then you complain, I send you one message, and then I'm castigated for it.
What?
You know, what I'm saying is that there's certain things and certain people that you are completely attached to, and then if you enter into your incursion, into your zone at a time you're not supposed to be, you will...
Oh, well, you mean I won't take your calls when I'm trying to get to sleep? Yeah, because I do go to bed quite early. He's got beef. Speaking of phones and images and all the rest of it, Nicola, good segue here, because there's a real problem, isn't there, with people sharing intimate images and then them being posted online without their permission. What's the Eye saying about all of this?
So, Georgia Harrison, who... unfortunately, ex-partner...
Is this revenge porn you're talking about?
Revenge porn. Yeah, her ex-partner filmed her without her knowing, and then posted her, their sex tape online, and she's done amazing. She's campaigned, and the law is going to change. So now if you do post images online or even send images to friends, you will face jail for up to 2 years. And
it's a good thing.
It's brilliant. George has done so well with this, and I think it's so important, especially for young children. I've got a 17-year-old. It's so worrying the way social media is and how addictive it is, and, you know, how much you can see online. Andy, we were speaking about this, wasn't we? You know, how much you can actually see online and how people think that it's, you know, oh, it's all right to send that. She let me take it, or she sent it to me so I can send it on. Just, you know, it's not OK. And you don't... Before, you used to have to be able to prove that the person that sent it was intending to cause you harm. Well, of course it causes you harm if you, you know, if pictures, intimate pictures of you...
Private is private.
Private is private, but unfortunately these days we've lost that. So this is fantastic, and Georgia has done so well. I'm super proud of her.
And it's been described as a historic turning point and hopefully a huge deterrent for anyone thinking about sharing it, and a bit of reassurance for particularly girls who find themselves in these predicaments.
Absolutely.
Oh, Andy, got to do this one. Everybody thinks they can do a podcast or whatever, but not everybody can. Give us the assessment of Meghan Markle's efforts at this sort of thing.
Yeah, so one of Hollywood's most powerful figures, Jeremy Zimmer, who's the head of a big talent agency over there, he has said, it turns out Meghan Markle was not a great audio talent, or necessarily any kind of talent. And just because you're a celebrity doesn't mean that you can have a go at something and be brilliant at it. This is after Meghan Markle and Harry, whatever he's calling himself now, Prince Harry, formerly known as, lost their Spotify deal. Meghan Markle was given this great platform, however many tens of millions of pounds, to solve, you know, to promote the issues that affect women, things that are standing in the way of the female cause, etc., etc. And then, of course, they haven't produced any content. And it's a bit like, well, they produced a worryingly small amount of content. And she had a few chats with Serena Williams, and then she didn't do any of the other interviews because she got a minion to do it. But look, you know, you sign up for these deals, you say you're going to fight a good cause, and then they haven't really produced anything. And what they produced wasn't of a good quality, according to this talent
says,
agent.
turns out Meghan was not a great audio talent or necessarily any kind of talent. Quite a withering verdict, that one. Andy and Nicola back in 40 minutes' time. For the moment, thank you very much indeed. We continue with the royal theme. The Prince of Wales continues his tour of Britain today. He's going to more locations chosen to become blueprints for his new project about homelessness called Homewards.
So following in his mother's footsteps there. Yesterday, Prince William visited Lambeth, Bournemouth and Newport to launch his 5-year campaign to try and end homelessness. And our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, has this report.
I first visited a homelessness shelter when I was 11 with my mother. The visits we made together left a deep and lasting impression.
5 years, 6 locations, 1 dream. A personal commitment to make homelessness rare, brief and unrepeated. Homewards, launched by Prince William yesterday, supports communities across the UK selected to become blueprints for solutions to end homelessness. One such blueprint will be formed in Lambeth, bringing together local charities, experts and advocates to create a tailor-made solution to support those needing a home. His Royal Highness visited Mosaic Clubhouse, which treats mental health patients as members, focusing on their strengths rather than their weaknesses. The Prince wanted to spotlight the link between poor mental health and homelessness.
It doesn't take much for a trauma around mental health to lead to other catastrophes in life, which can lead to homelessness. If you have a relationship breakdown, and that can be followed by loss of a job, you can very quickly find yourself without a home as well.
43-year-old Paul experienced homelessness when he was younger. Poor mental health meant he ended up in hospital. He thinks ending up homeless made his mental health worse.
When I was younger, in stages where I was homeless and that sort of thing, everything just gets so overwhelming and everything that you just can't function properly and everything and that. So when there's services like this, even if you are in a position of still being homeless, a lot of weight is lifted.
Prince William's conceded ending homelessness is a big challenge. An estimated 300,000 people are either sleeping rough, sofa surfing or stuck in temporary accommodation. And critics of the monarchy point out the future king's enormous wealth and privilege. Those close to the Prince of Wales insist he's aware of how fortunate he is, which is why he's using his public platform to promote lasting change to help end homelessness. Much better, some believe, than others.
If a politician says something, it's like in one ear and out the other sort of thing. But if someone like your future king is saying something, I think people take that lot more to heart and serious.
The Prince of Wales also visited Bournemouth yesterday, highlighting how empowering people with skills can help them get a job, and Newport, where he saw an example of a community delivering long-term settled housing. Today, His Royal Highness continues his tour of the UK, visiting 3 more locations committed to tackling homelessness in their area. Cameron Walker, GB News, London.
Right, stay with us. We'll have all the very latest on what's happening in Russia. But first of all, here's your forecast.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. A bright start for some out there this morning, but generally quite a cloudy day, rain across parts of the north. Much of the south will stay dry thanks to this area of high pressure, but it's being squeezed away thanks to this area of low pressure that's already bringing outbreaks of rain across Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland and will continue to trickle its way eastwards through the day. So turning damp over parts of Wales and northern England at the moment. The rain will be on and off here through the day. The rain will spread into northeastern Scotland eventually after some early brightness, and a bright start to the day across East Anglia and the southeast, but it will cloud over here as we go through the day. Much of the south of England will stay dry, but staying fairly damp across southern Scotland. The rain may ease a touch in Belfast, allowing temperatures to rise to 21 Celsius. Generally in the high teens where it's dull and damp. Further south, even though it's cloudy, we should get temperatures into the low 20s. Quite a misty, murky night to come tonight as well, particularly around western coasts. Further outbreaks of rain across eastern England and Scotland, but should tend to ease as we go through the second half of the night. So many places will become dry as we head into Wednesday. It will be a pretty warm night, however, so warmer than the night just gone, with temperatures holding up in the mid or even high teens in some locations. So a humid start to Wednesday. As I said, many places will start dry, but tomorrow morning, fairly quickly, I think we'll see some outbreaks of rain pushing back into Northern Ireland, and this line of rain could have some pretty heavy bursts mixed in as it comes across parts of Scotland, then into England and Wales later on. Now, most of the day across central and eastern England looks dry, and it should turn drier to the northwest and a little fresher here. But for England and Wales, quite a warm, humid feeling day with temperatures once more in the southeast, 25, maybe 26 Celsius. That humidity may spark some heavy thundery showers on this weather front before it clears through during Thursday, and the weather remaining pretty changeable with more low pressure systems coming in this week.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Cracks appear in Russia's truce as Britain warns a mass evacuation of nationals is impossible.
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Tuesday, the 27th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Thank you for your company, leading our news on this Tuesday morning.
The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, has warned that an airlift evacuation of British nationals from Russia in the event of civil war would be impossible, but that the government is looking at all scenarios.
It comes as the truce that halted the advance on Moscow begins to fall apart. Vladimir Putin vowing to punish the mutineers in a televised address. The leader of the Wagner group last night called the coup a masterclass on how to launch an invasion.
The former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, will today become the first politician directly involved in the COVID response to face the pandemic inquiry.
The cost of sending a migrant to Rwanda could be £170,000, with MPs urging that plans to detain children should be abandoned. We'll speak to the Women and Equalities Committee's chair, who says the risk to children outweighs any damage to the government's policy agenda.
And mother of 2, Nicola Bulley, drowned after entering cold river water with no evidence of any other involvement. That's according to an inquest into her death. Ms. Bulley's partner, Paul Ansell, will give evidence later today.
And we'll find out the sunshine has now come to an end with the latest weather update.
Things have been clouding over overnight, a greyer day today compared to yesterday. There'll be some rain around as well, chiefly across the north. Join me later for a full GB News weather forecast.
This debate of the illegal migration bill, and it's come to light that the cost of sending a migrant to Rwanda could be about 170 grand per person. Now, here's the question. We're all supposed to jump back and be repulsed at that and say, we can't do that. If that is a price worth paying? Or would you say under no circumstances is that worth it? But if it does solve the migrant crisis, would you be prepared as a taxpayer to say, yep, 170 grand, cheap at half the price. You can take my money for that. Let us know what you think on this one, because at 8:15 this morning we're going to be talking to Caroline Noakes, who's an MP who's says certainly children should never be sent on one of these migration flights. But the thing is, if you exclude children, if children are sent on these, well, it's all very complicated. 170 grand, would you pay it? Do you think it's government money well spent or not at any price?
To our top story, though, this hour, and an airlift evacuation of British nationals from Russia in the event of civil war would be impossible, according to the Foreign Secretary.
Well, his comments came as the truce between Vladimir Putin and the leader of the Wagner group appeared to fracture, with the Russian president calling for the organisers of the coup to be not only punished, but brutally punished in a televised address.
The organisers of the rebellion, betraying their country, their people, betrayed those who were lured into the crime. They lied to them, pushed them towards death, under fire, to shoot their own people. It was precisely this outcome, fratricide, that Russia's enemies wanted. Both the neo-Nazis in Kiev and their Western masters, and all sorts of national traitors. They wanted Russian soldiers to kill each other.
Well, both sides of the argument made public statements yesterday. That address was followed by a message from the mercenary leader, Prigozhin, in which he called his advance on Moscow a masterclass and said the Russian public were disappointed when he stopped.
In America, the President, Joe Biden, has spoken overnight, addressing President Putin's accusations that the West was involved.
I also convened our key allies on a Zoom call to make sure we're all on the same page. It's critical that we're coordinated in our response and coordinated in what we to anticipate. They agreed with me that we had to make sure we gave Putin no excuse. Let me emphasize, we gave Putin no excuse to blame this on the West or to blame this on NATO. We made clear that we were not involved. We had nothing to do with it. This was part of a struggle within the Russian system.
Let's speak to Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, who joins us this morning. Good to see you. I suppose the big question is, with President Putin's eye off the ball on what's happening in Ukraine a little bit, with his focus very much on Prigozhin, do you think that there could be some respite for Ukraine and the war there?
Well, it doesn't look like it, actually. I think a lot of people expected that the mutiny or rebellion or show of force, whatever it was from the Wagner group, would distract the Russian military to the extent that they would be less capable of resisting the Ukrainian attacks, which are part of the counteroffensive that we've heard so much about. But that doesn't appear to have been the case. So I don't think that Russia has taken its eye off the ball in Ukraine, but there's no doubt that the march up the M4 to Moscow was a major distraction and a bit of a wake-up call for the Putin regime.
Prigozhin seems to have got his money, Lieutenant Colonel. He's got his money made off. Now, Putin is furious, incandescent. So what all seemed nicey, kissy, huggy on Saturday has been totally ripped up, and Putin realised he's been made a fool of. He's paid the money, probably. Prigozhin, is I don't know where he goes next or what's next for him. How do you see this playing out?
Well, I think we're talking about two fairly massive egos here, and the one thing we know about Putin is that he doesn't like being crossed. So I think that Prigozhin's card is marked, and apparently he's in Belarus, he may be in Minsk. How many of his fighters have gone with him is a moot point, I don't know. But if I were advising him, I'd be telling him not to accept any cups of tea or enter any tall buildings, or indeed touch any door handles without wearing gloves.
Yeah. Does the Wagner group exist without Prigozhin?
Good question. I think that they've got ongoing operations in Africa, which I can't see why they wouldn't continue. And of course, there will be other leaders in the Wagner private military company who can take over. In fact, many people say that Prigozhin is just basically a figurehead, a sort of PR man who's doing all the sort of media stuff. So I think there's a future in the Wagner group, but whether there's a future for the Wagner group inside Russia or indeed inside Ukraine remains to be seen.
What is best for European peace, for stability in Ukraine? Is it Prigozhin or Putin? I mean, we heard Mikhail Khodorkovsky over the weekend saying my enemy's enemy is my friend. On that basis, he'd like to see Prigozhin successful in perhaps toppling Putin. But is that what the West really wants?
Ooh, that is a question, actually. I would say that in many cases, better the devil you know than what might come next. I don't think there's any mileage for the West in promoting or supporting Prigozhin against Putin, because that'll just exacerbate the problems that are already there. I think Prigozhin is probably going to sort of fade away into obscurity if he doesn't meet some awful accident, and Putin will continue in power in the Kremlin. But I don't think there's any doubt that Putin's authority has been dented by this, and it may be that his days in power are numbered.
Stuart, the fact that Prigozhin called his march on Moscow a masterclass, you're dealing with Russia. Well, at worst, Russia's what? The third biggest military power in the world. It might be second, it might be first for all I know. But it has to be reckoned with. How was Putin, first of all, how did he get into a position where he had to hire a private army? And secondly, how could he not stop? I don't know what size the march was. Was it 25,000 men? Was it 5,000 men on Moscow? He's got an air force. Why didn't he just hit their convoy line? Why didn't they just go big time? Where is Putin's army and air force?
Well, basically, it's in Ukraine, and with other, obviously, elements scattered around the rest of Russia. And they did indeed try to take out the Prigozhin column heading towards Moscow, if that's what we want to call it, but lost aircraft. And some people are saying that up to 7 Russian helicopters and aircraft were lost trying to attack the column. And I think that it indicates that the veneer of Russian military power is quite thin. They've concentrated their forces in Ukraine for all the obvious reasons, and they haven't left sufficient troops in Moscow itself, in Russia itself proper, to defend against that sort of attack, unexpected attack. So, yes, I think that we have to question whether Russia is still a first world, first tier military power against that background.
Can I just ask you lastly one question about the Wagner fighters? Many of them were given just 5 minutes to decide whether they wanted to face a firing squad or join the mercenary group led by Prigozhin. We've then heard now that the Russian army are offering them contracts if they want to join, or, as Putin was saying overnight, they'd be welcomed back into their family homes in Russia as long as they left the Wagner group. Do you think they'll stay loyal to Prigozhin given that, or do you think, as Prigozhin claims, they actually have a huge amount of support from civilians and indeed perhaps some members of the Russian military as well?
Yes, all of the above. I think some will choose, particularly if they're given their promised pardons from their crimes, the ones who were recruited from the prisons. If that is still applicable, some of them will choose to go home to their families as free men, if you like. There's indications that some of them have gone with Prigozhin into Belarus. What they will do there, we don't know. And I think some will probably join the Russian military. But the point about the employment of the Wagner group by the Russians, by Putin, was that Russia is short of soldiers, and it's also Putin's not happy about ordering a second general mobilization. So anything he can do to avoid that helps his case. And by absorbing former Wagner fighters into the Russian armed forces, it may avoid that mobilization order.
Stuart Crawford is a defence analyst. We appreciate your whole analysis, Lieutenant Colonel. Thank you very much indeed. Leave it there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Sending a single illegal immigrant to Rwanda or another safe country could cost the government £170,000 each, according to new analysis from the Home Office.
Well, judges will make a decision about the Rwanda policy this Thursday as the government battles to try and stop the boats.
But the chair of the Women and Equalities Committee, Caroline Noakes, says children's safety should be the biggest concern. And she joins us now. And Caroline, sort of very few people, I think, would disagree and argue with what you're saying there about children's safety. I suppose the problem is as soon as you start ring-fencing children, they become used by these migrant masters, these people who are organising the boats, and they become some sort of trading piece in all of this. Is that not a fear for you?
Yes, it is a fear, and we certainly heard that argument from the Immigration Minister when he appeared in front of the Select Committee. He was very concerned that were you to say children should not be removed to Rwanda, it would in effect create a trade in children, so every single migrant would find a child to bring with them. Yeah. Look, I think the committee's view very strongly is that detention centres are no place for children. We don't think that children will be adequately safeguarded in Rwanda. And our big concern is the clash of legislation, as it were, with the Children's Act running hard into the new illegal migration bill, where there was simply be a conflict between the duty we have to look after children and the government imposing a duty upon itself to remove people to Rwanda.
Of course, when we talk about children, obviously highly emotive, we think of little ones and obviously perilous crossings, and, right-thinking people will be appalled at that idea. But of course, legally, children can include perfectly fit, healthy and fully mature 17-year-old males. And we have seen in the past that the protection of children in this country has meant that there have been a huge influx of not only 17-year-olds, but those pretending to be 17, later proven to be a little bit older. And the government is very wary of this as a pull factor.
I think these are two really distinct and important issues. So first and foremost, I absolutely support the Home Office in having rigorous age verification checks on those who might be late teenagers. And I think it's important that we do establish people's ages correctly. But my committee was very concerned that whilst the government has put a stay on the removal of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children to Rwanda, there is no such position in place for children with their families. So very young children who we have seen images of them coming over, making terrible, terrible crossings on boats, could be put in detention centres. Now look, effectively, a detention camp is no place for a child. They should be in school, they should be being looked after properly. And we have said very clearly we want to see the government put the same rigorous exemption in place for accompanied children as it has for unaccompanied.
We're sitting just sort of digesting what you're saying there, and through your humanity, of course, you're making a difficult situation even more complex and more difficult. And then we get to the point, which I think it's your committee that has priced this at £169,000 per migrant to send them to Rwanda. We were asking, I mean, that obviously is supposed to make people think, oh, no, that's not worth it. Goodness me, that's ridiculous. But there might be a lot of people in the country who would say, if it stops the boats, then yes, pay it.
So it's not my committee, it's the Home Office themselves that has indicated that they think that the figure is £169,000 per migrant. Look, my committee was looking very specifically at people with protected characteristics, vulnerable women, children, disabled people, LGBTQ people. There is a quite legitimate argument to be had, which clearly the Home Office is now trying to investigate, as to whether the Rwanda scheme is value for money. I would look at it at the moment with a plane having been chartered that took off with nobody on board it, with the extensive costs that there have been fighting this through the court, in addition to the millions of pounds handed over to Rwanda for not one single migrant to go there, and say, well, the Home Office is right to be asking whether this will act as a deterrent. In order to make it value for money, it has to be deterring 40% of people seeking to make a crossing. And the evidence that we've seen so far is it's simply not doing that.
Yeah, and by the Home Office's own admission, I mean, this long-awaited economic assessment of the bill yesterday saying the cost saving is, and I quote, highly uncertain, but approximately £106,000 to £165,000, which is less than the £169,000 that they're saying it will cost. So I suppose on that assessment, are you supportive of the Rwanda bill as a whole, irrespective of whether it applies to children?
No, absolutely not. I've never voted for the illegal migration bill, and I won't vote for it. I think this is the wrong thing to be doing. And to be quite frank, I simply don't see that it's going to have an effective deterrent impact.
What would be an effective deterrent? Anything you can think of?
Well, look at the returns agreement that the government has put in place with Albania. That is working, and it's crucially important. Leaving the EU meant that we lost returns agreements with countries across the EU, and I think it's really important that the government is doubling its efforts to make sure that we have returns agreement across the globe with safe countries, so that when an asylum claim is made from somewhere where an individual simply cannot be in peril, then there's a swift route to return them to their country of origin. And we have to work with our European partner on upstream migration, looking at the migrant flows that are coming in, particularly from North Africa at the moment, and working out how, with our allies, we can successfully combat that in region. And some of that will be about making sure that international aid is effectively spent in region to make sure that people don't seek to make these perilous crossings throughout Europe and then onto the Channel.
Well, good luck with that one, Caroline Noakes. It's a difficult one. I don't envy you your job, your task, and good luck with your findings. Thanks for explaining them to us this morning.
Now with the time at 8:18, let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
The chair of the Independent Commission for Equity in Cricket said that she encountered horrific stories in a report which investigated racism, sexism and misogyny in the sport. She told the BBC that cricket culture in England and Wales is rotten, with the Commission making 44 recommendations.
New measures have been announced to tackle the non-consensual sharing of intimate images online. Amendments to the Online Safety Bill will remove the need to prove intent to cause distress, making it easier to charge and convict offenders. Those found guilty could face up to 6 months in jail.
Fresh food inflation has eased for a second month as supermarkets cut the price of household staples. It decelerated to 14.6% in June. That was down from 15.4% in May. The chief executive of the British Retail Consortium says that if the current situation continues, it should drop to single digits later this year. Did we think we'd get to a stage where we'd all be saying, oh, fruit and veg is only rising by 9% year on year? It really is scandalous. If you're having difficulty paying for your food bill, let us know, share it with us, and we'll put it on the programme.
Stay with us. We'll have the latest on that shop price inflation figure. Supermarket bosses prepare to be quizzed by MPs today. That's all coming up next.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know, Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 8:24. Still to come on today's programme. Labour is going to attempt to force a vote on the mortgage crisis today. So at 9:05, we'll ask the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury what he's proposing to help people struggling with rising interest rates.
9:15, parents preparing to pay what can be excessive amounts for school uniforms. We'll ask if it's time to do away with formal school clothes and official shops which sell them. You can join in the discussion. GBViews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GB News as you have been doing throughout the morning.
Lots of you have been getting in touch across all sorts of topics. We were talking about breast cancer and mammograms earlier. Helen says they're not painful. Uncomfortable, yes, but not painful. I have mine every 3 years, and 8 years ago my screening showed my grade 3 cancer, now in remission, but the screening saved my life. And Fiona, the same. I had breast cancer detection from mammogram surgery, chemo and radiotherapy. So grateful it was found, or I wouldn't be here. I was 58.
Have you heard of the Hays diet, Hays?
No.
We were talking about diets earlier, and Roger says an easy approach to healthy living is to implement the Hays diet. Howard Hay, the inventor, lived over 200 years ago. He simply advocated don't put foods that fight each other together, starches and proteins, for instance, at the same meal. And more importantly, don't eat refined carbohydrates. It's simple and it works.
We were just discussing, weren't we, the right way to diet. Terry says the truth is everyone's different with a different genetic body type and metabolism speed. Some people can store more carbohydrate within their muscles. Some people are better eating 3 meals per day, while others 5 small meals. It's so true, everybody's different. I could just look at things and put on weight.
Yeah.
So unfair.
Andrew is saying about your phone, you were talking about being on holiday, you like to use your camera, but you didn't want to see your text messages. He said if you put your phone into flight mode, you won't get calls, but you can take pictures.
I have to turn the Wi-Fi off or the internet off, though, otherwise I get news updates and this and that, and I don't want anything.
But that won't affect your camera.
Well, if you've got Wi-Fi on, it will. Oh, sorry, the camera, yeah.
So you can you can just use it as a camera.
Yes.
I suppose that's the thing. Very good. Thank you very much for those. Shop price inflation has slowed this month, not that you would notice. 8.4%, it was 9%. The British Retail Consortium confirming those figures.
Yeah, and food inflation has also dropped to 14.6%, down from 15.4% in May.
So, supermarket chiefs are preparing to be grilled by MPs on the Business and Trade Select Committee. And we'll bring in consumer journalist Harry Wallop on this one. What would you like to wallop them with, Harry?
Good morning, Eamonn. Well, I suppose the question they're going to be asked is how much profit are you making from these increasing food prices? How much are you sharing the pain with consumers? And the supermarket's going to say, well, we are sharing the pain because the most recent results from Tesco and Sainsbury's show that their profits and crucially their profit margins, how many pounds they keep in their tills, they have fallen. That's what the Tesco and Sainsbury's will say.
I was almost in tears hearing the answers to this yesterday. They say for every £100 any of us spend in a supermarket, they only get to keep £3.
Yeah, so profit margins in supermarkets are very, very low. Tesco's is the industry best. They keep about £4 out of every 100. Sainsbury's about 3. We think Aldi and Lidl, they're not publicly quoted companies, so the figures aren't so clear. We think it's only £1 or £2. To put that into perspective, the food manufacturers, the big beasts like Kraft or Heinz or Unilever, they're all double digits. They're around about 14, 15%. So the supermarkets can legitimately say, look, hey, we're not the bad guys here. You should be grilling the food manufacturers just as much as you should be grilling us.
So look, lots of grilling going on, but meanwhile, all of us have to eat, and so many people feeling the pain. I read a recent Which survey that said that the mental health of 1 in 4 of us has been negatively affected by soaring food prices.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a new survey that's come out this morning. I mean, I think there's no doubt it is the relentlessness of the food price increases, because it's not just, inflation is an annual measure, and food prices, hey, they might be easing, but they are still increasing. They're still going up by 14%, and we're now into the second year of this. So there just seems to be no real light at the end of the tunnel. The supermarkets are cutting a few key lines. So we take milk, for instance. A pint of milk has been cut across all the supermarkets from around about 95 pence to 90 pence. But you go back only a few years ago, a pint of milk was 43 pence.
Gosh.
So I think that's the worry. There have been quite a few headline-grabbing cuts, but they just don't come anywhere close to touching the sides.
Well, I'm agreeing with you, Harry, in that we seem to be identifying the big food manufacturers as the bad guys in all of this.
Well, it's hard because, there's a lot of people in the supply chain. All the way, if we take something, even a basic commodity like a banana, you think, well, there's nothing that really happens to a banana. It gets cut, it gets put on a refrigerated ship, it goes across the world, gets ripened in a warehouse, it then gets trucked to the supermarkets. Who's making money? And everyone, if you ask them, they all point the finger at each other. And a lot of it, shipping companies, because of the post-pandemic huge pent-up demand for shipping containers going around the world, and a lot of our food does arrive from the other side of the world. I think their profits increased fourfold, or they made more profits in 1 year post-pandemic than they had in the previous 20. So it's like, is it shipping companies? Is it food companies? Is it supermarkets? The issue is we, the poor mug at the end of the supply chain, we seem to be feeling the most pain. That's a slight issue.
And shrinkflation, oh my goodness me, they think we're stupid. They'll say, oh, our prices have gone down and the price stays the same. But their contents of their packets gets much, much smaller. The strength of their alcohol input is reduced as well. So many tricks of the trade, but nothing. You take any food product and you look at it 20 years ago, same packaging, the same. We were really being ripped off there, Harry.
Well, that has been shrinkflation has been happening for a long time, long actually before this current crisis. If anything, actually, this crisis has made it a little bit easier on the shrinkflation front. It's easier to push through shrinkflation when prices are stable. Now they're rising, actually. A lot of manufacturers and to an extent the supermarkets do think, well, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to push prices up. They would argue that though it's very painful at the moment for consumers, we still pay very little for our food in relative terms, far less than our parents or our grandparents did. In terms of as a percentage of disposable income, we spend around about 15% on food. Our grandparents, just after the war, they were spending 30% of their disposable income on food and drink. So we have been a golden generation. We were very spoiled. We got used to low prices, and sadly, that has come to the end. And it's unpleasant to say, but we're just going to have to get used to it. The best we can hope is that food prices stop rising, and that should be happening hopefully soon, but they're just not going to go back to where they were before.
Well, our interview's also sadly come to an end, Harry. Harry Wallop is a consumer journalist there. Thank you very much indeed for going through our shopping basket.
I did not know that.
Harry.
I did not know it cost our grandparents 30% of their income. Because you do always think back to, well, they knew how to make food last then, didn't they? I suppose they did when it cost that much more. And I sometimes find it patronising when people say, well, you've got a batch cook. Well, we're all working so darned hard. There's no time for all of that.
Well, I always remember going to the shops with my mum and her hands being cut into by the bags that she was carrying, because there was no cars bringing you to the supermarket in those days or anything like that. And coming back, she used to bring us to the supermarket because we would have to carry the groceries. What did she call them? They were called the provisions. The provisions.
Provisions.
Yeah, it was like stocking up an army camp, so it was. But there we go. Stay with us. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to have the papers. Andy Jones and Nicola McLean, very entertaining they are too.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions, and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio, and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Okay, here we've got some breaking news pictures coming in to us here from Matt Hancock, the former Health Secretary, arriving at the COVID inquiry today. There he is, where he's due to give evidence to the committee today. And we'll report that to you as events get underway. Joining us to go through the papers in more detail this morning, who have I got?
We have the writer and journalist Andy Jones and the TV personality Nicola McLean. Welcome back to both of you. Nicola,
you have done okay so far, so don't mess it up,
yeah.
OK?
Should we start with Glasgow? He certainly didn't mess it up, did he? Sir Elton John brought in 7.6 million viewers. That's the most watched headliner in Glasgow history.
Unbelievable, and for what they're rumouring to be his last kind of show in Britain. 120,000 fans watched live in the crowd. What an experience for them. And he was unbelievable. So I hate to moan, but I just thought that we would have better guests. It's lovely that he brings out new talent, and it's really giving of him to do that. But I felt like we needed Kiki D, we needed Britney Spears. I mean, Blue, where was Blue? I was disappointed.
It was because there was so much anticipation that Britney was going to be flying in, and this expectation. I mean, you don't mind the newcomers getting a little slot, but you want some of the old...
Do you know what? Give the newcomers a slot, but not on Elton's gig. Like, I felt like for his last one, it could have been even better than it was.
You see, the thing that this proves is that when any of us pay money to go to a concert or a festival or whatever it is, and you want to see your favourite group, you want to hear them sing the songs that you know. You don't want new material.
Yeah.
And apparently Arctic Monkeys, I heard, made that mistake. They came out with a lot of new stuff.
Yeah, Elton just played the hits, and how many hits he has, by the way. But Arctic Monkeys played a lot of their newer stuff, or at least they played their bigger hits, but they played them really slow, slightly different versions, and it didn't go down particularly well. But to be fair, Alex, the lead singer of the Arctic Monkeys, did have a bad voice, so I don't know whether that played anything into it.
Have you ever been to Glasgow?
No, I'm not a festival kind of gal.
Does it appeal to you then? No, not at all. What about you?
You've got to walk miles and miles and miles. I tell you what, your calves really feel it. Trudging through broken pint glasses, stepping over passed out people, fighting your way to get whatever it is they sell these days, a falafel wrap or something. Warm beer, stood in the sun all day.
You're
it's
really
quite nice,
selling
very
it to me.
fatigued.
But I think it's the size of
It's a
Glastonbury
real test of a relationship.
for me. I think it's just way too big. You do have to walk miles and miles, and it does feel sometimes like a refugee camp.
Yeah, it does feel like a sort of a medieval battlefield at times, fighting through people. But you also... You're watching people there at Elton John, and it's fabulous watching it on the TV. If you're there, you're getting the atmosphere, but Elton is a tiny gold speck in the distance, and you're basically watching it on a screen anyway.
Yeah.
The Nicola Bulley inquest reported in the newspapers, the Sun have it this morning. Has this answered questions or raised more questions, Andy?
I think really it has to answer them. I think there will be a lot of conspiracy theorists out there who have different opinions, as they always do. But Nicola Bulley tragically fell into the water, it's believed, and then drowned within 10 seconds, falling into an icy river. They found her dog running
right
loose.
There straight away. Right, so to me that raises a question. Why did she leave her phone on the bench?
That's what I said.
Yeah. I mean, if she fell into the water, if she was getting into the water or, you know, she would have left her phone on the bench. I don't see why.
But also, if she saw a dog near the edge and she was, I've got to save the dog, went towards the water and then fell in. We saw that, tragically, those two young people in Bournemouth drowning very, very quickly in water, and they thought it was very safe. Water is incredibly dangerous, particularly when it looks it's safest. But like you and Nicola, I have the question of why would you leave your phone there? There is still questions, but they say that from a look at her body that she wasn't attacked, and that the injuries that she has are all related to being in the water.
Why are they saying she drowned instantly? Are they saying the cold had a big effect? Or?
Yeah, so apparently with how cold the water was, she would have gasped and she would have swallowed so much water that she would have drowned. But maybe it's because I watch too many crime documentaries and I feel like I'm a budding detective, but I don't get this, and I feel like maybe I want something to have happened so that
it answers your instincts.
Yeah, because I feel it's just so sad, isn't it? And the way it was reported, you know, and what was going on in her personal life, I just think it all sounds so unjust. It would feel a little bit better if it wasn't just a really bad accident.
Well, yeah.
You just got to feel so sorry for those little girls she's left behind, and their daddy giving evidence at that inquest today. And we will have a reporter at that coroner's court for us from about 10 minutes' time. So hopefully we can check in with them.
Nicola, are you a classical musical fan or not? The Times have a story on the front page that's interested you.
No, I'm not a classical music fan. I can't play any instruments. I mean, I tried the recorder. It's horrific.
Go on, carry on. Sorry.
No, go.
I was going to say, part of the point is, at state school, the only thing you get given is a recorder.
Yeah, it's true.
And this is the crux of the story. It's like, have a recorder, this is all you're getting, and then that's your musical involvement. Where at more public schools, as the story will tell you, they get a lot more better access, and then they dominate this area.
And they're saying that they have put in they want music lessons to be for everyone. They've put in £79 million to keep it going. But my kids are at state school, not at private school. They don't get given a cello. And I'm not mad about that, but you know, it is a class thing. You know, we spoke about class. It is a class thing. My niece and nephew go to private school, and they definitely had more opportunity to play the piano and play the cello and things like that. But my kids aren't musical, so for me, I'm not mad about this, but I can understand why it feels that, you know, people in private school get more, you know, the arts are taken more, actors and musicians are definitely given more opportunity.
Better funded and more opportunity. This is the head of an orchestra which is saying that because of this, it is becoming the preserve of the privately educated, because school children do not routinely learn how to play an instrument.
And it ties in with the cricket story as well, doesn't it? Where
absolutely.
you're getting the best access to sporting opportunities in private schools. And, you know, this is because all of the state schools have sold all their playing fields off, and there's absolutely no resources left. And I think there has to come a point where we say, right, are we going to have a bash at the private schools for actually providing, you know, a bit of cricket and a bit of classical education, or should we be trying to improve standards in our state schools?
Well, they're saying, you know, funding's going down and music is the first thing to go. But, you know, you bash private schools, but you know, if you're paying for it, then that's what you want. That's what you're getting. You know, what can you do? You can't expect your kids to be getting the same education.
But I suppose it's not just about learning an instrument or playing cricket. It's the confidence that builds. I think when your son or your daughter plays an instrument and they go on stage and they realise that they're good at something, and it bleeds a confidence into all areas of their life. If they're smashing sixes and getting lots of wickets in cricket and being a part of a team, it builds that confidence. And then when you see in the workplace, you see someone from a more privileged background against somebody who's from a working class background, they're the noisiest voice in the room, they dominate, etc. You see it in politics, and also in this story with Melvyn Bragg that we're going to talk about.
OK, this is in the Mail, page 7, and they're saying the BBC's view of the working class is a miserable one. Well, Melvyn Bragg is saying this. Yeah. And Melvyn Bragg, let's just point this out to people. A lot of people might think he's very posh and upper class. He may well be now, but he started out, he was working class from Carlisle. I think his father
owned a pub.
Right, OK, yeah. Tell us more.
Yeah, and Nicola's got opinions on this as well, I think. But the BBC is to blame for the portrayal of working class people as being miserable and in despair. He said the BBC only want to know working class people if they can show them as sort of thick, ignorant, grim up north, that their lives are miserable, broke or in despair. And he says the BBC is the worst culprit for this. They only want working class people if they are miserable, whether it's EastEnders or a crime drama or a TV show, whether it's question time audience.
In defence of the BBC, I would say that is because they're frightened of offending. They're frightened of portraying that this is acceptable, that you can be in poverty, for instance, or deprived, and yet be happy. They want to shine a light on the social inequality of all of this, surely.
A little bit, but it can start being a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, can't it? I think we're talking about opportunity and privilege again, where if you're a young working class person and you're watching on TV and you also maybe looking at your own life and thinking, well, I haven't got a lot of money, I haven't got a lot of opportunity, and then that's reflected back to you on TV. Where are the working class success stories that the BBC is showing? Where are they overcoming all
Well, obviously Melvyn Bragg's one of them.
Well, quite, but he's been at the BBC for 60 years. How does he resonate with any younger people?
He's Lord Bragg. Yeah, Lord Bragg. So how would you reflect, or how would you sum up your working class lifestyle?
So I grew up on a council estate, and I had, you know, a tough time, but also I enjoyed it in some parts. But what it made me do is go, I'm getting out of here, and I'm going to make sure. And I say it to my kids, you know, obviously, I'm not saying they live on a council estate. Of course they don't, but they don't go to private school. But I'm like, do you know what? You know, you go on trial for a football club because you want to be a footballer. You've got to make sure you're ruthless. That's got to be yours, but they don't have the ruthlessness stuff.
They don't have the hunger,
They don't have the hunger that I've got, and that bothers me. I'm like, well, if you were kicking a football against a garage in a council estate, you would have already have made it by now, because you don't have what I've got. So I'm more than happy that I grew up the way I did, because would I be able to do what I do now with a more privileged background? Probably not. But I will make sure that I work. I will make sure I get jobs over other people. I'm sure when I modelled, people would say I was ruthless. Yeah, I was, because I was getting out of there.
Good for you.
What I would say as well is that it's partly because of a lack of people from working class backgrounds that are appointed in the BBC, decision making as well. It's not just, we've got a couple of news journalists who are from working class backgrounds. The people that are making the decisions and creating programmes and ticking yes or no for a show have to be from different backgrounds.
So do you think that the presenters on The One Show or on Strictly Come Dancing are all particularly middle class and highly educated? I mean, I think of Tess Daly, I think of Ronan Keating, Alex Jones.
The managerial decisions are made at a different level, the editorial decisions.
That's what I mean,
But where are we looking to replace these people with working class?
But it's not just about having a voice. Somebody who presents a show came from a working class background, they can tell an anecdote about a housing estate. When the programmes are being commissioned, they're not being commissioned by people from working class backgrounds or from a variety of backgrounds. They're from Oxbridge, and some of them, and I see this in newsrooms as well when I've worked there, they see the area that they're not in, the north, there's some sort of Ken Loach drama.
But do you think
it's like
EastEnders
Coronation
is being
Street.
watched by posh people? I mean, people who
No,
love
but
watching...
it's being made by posh people. That's the
What it's
point.
been commissioned by.
Mm.
So it's the commissioners that we don't like.
This is what I think you need. It's not saying I dislike this person or that person.
working class people.
But you have to have diversity. Shouldn't just be about colour or gender or sexuality. It should be about class. We see this in politics as well. Very, very few people are coming from different class backgrounds in politics. Certainly in the cabinet, and then you end up with this situation of they're not speaking for us. Well, because they're only speaking from the same Oxbridge University. They all went from the same courses.
Are changing. I mean, I've watched news as the biggest preserve of snobbery and class that I've ever come across. It's laughable, actually. But what they've done now, they talk about diversity. They now give jobs to people from different ethnic backgrounds who are posh people from different ethnic backgrounds, as opposed to deprived people. So they're not spreading it out. They can say, "Oh, look at our ethnic record. Look what we have done here." But they're replacing white-coloured people with black posh-coloured people, and I don't think that's evening the playing field.
Yeah, class is the big kicker.
But there we go. But it's dog eat dog. And what were the cavemen doing 1.45 million years ago?
Oh, yeah, well, I tell you what, if you're worried about eating during the cost of living crisis, cavemen 1.5 million years ago were eating each other. Scientists at the Smithsonian Museum are telling us they've found evidence that cavemen in Kenya were eating each other. So if you're worried about your neighbours, just be glad that they're not thinking about you on a dinner plate.
Good
on the barbecue.
Oh, gosh.
OK, guys, really enjoyed having you on today. Come back again
thank
sometime.
you. Nice
Nicola,
to see you.
thank
See you again.
Andy, thank you.
We were just discussing Nicola Bulley, weren't we? Well, the mother, of course, who went missing on her morning dog walk was, we understand, alive when she fell into the River Wye. This is according to an inquest looking into her death.
The Home Office pathologist said there's no evidence that Nicola was assaulted. Our North West reporter, Sophie Reaper, we go to her live in Preston as Miss Bulley's partner prepares to give evidence. Bring us up to date, Sophie.
Good morning to you both. Well, we enter day 2 of this Nicola Bulley inquest now here in Preston. Yesterday, we began with Senior Coroner James Adley calling on several witnesses to give evidence as part of this inquest. That includes hearing from Dr. Alison Armour, the forensic pathologist who examined Nicola's body just 2 days after it was recovered from the River Wye. She told the inquest that it's her belief that Nicola's cause of death was indeed drowning, and that she found no evidence whatsoever that there was any kind of third-party involvement in her death. We also heard yesterday from several members of the local community, some mothers, for example, who also have children at the local primary school. They either saw or interacted with Nicola that morning on the 27th of January when she first disappeared. They say that there didn't seem to be anything unusual about her. She just seemed as she usually did on the school run. We also then heard from DC Greenalsh, a constable in Lancashire Police. He's been investigating the data that was recovered from Nicola's iPhone and from her Fitbit. Now, what the data shows us on that Fitbit is that the morning that she disappeared, between 8 and 9:30, she covered around 3.5 kilometres and about 4,500 steps. But as soon as we reach 9:30, there's no more data in terms of steps or distance that was recorded. What that means is, from the phone, phone. We know that around 9:18 that morning was the last time she used that phone. She adjusted the volume on it. So that gives Lancashire Police around a 12-minute window between when she last used the phone and when the Fitbit stopped recording any kind of distance or steps. And that gives them that window when they believe Nicola could have gone into the water. Now, it makes for really rather grim listening, especially for her friends and family who were present here at court. Yesterday, we saw her parents, her sister Louise and her partner Paul. We're expecting to see them again here today, especially Paul and Louise, who, as you mentioned before, are scheduled to be giving evidence as part of the inquest. So later on today, I'll be returning with all the latest updates on what they have to tell the inquest here in Preston.
OK, Sophie, thanks very much indeed for that overview.
And your views coming in on former Health Secretary Matt Hancock appearing before a COVID committee today. Karen says, actually, I feel sorry for him. He's going to get some full-on grilling. Looking forward to seeing what he'll have to say about the early days and lockdowns in particular.
And talking about cricket and racism, Les says, my son, now 21, gave up cricket because he didn't like the whole atmosphere around the game. He was a very talented batsman and wicketkeeper all through age grade rugby from the age of 9. And Jeff says, you're right, there's racism in football. How few white British players are there in the Premier League?
Please do stay with us. More on that fragile truce, whatever is happening in Russia. We're on it as the leader of the Wagner group calls his advance a masterclass. President Putin disagrees.
But first, here's your Tuesday forecast with Alex D.
Good morning.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deacon and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. A bright start for some out there this morning, but generally quite a cloudy day, rain across parts of the north. Much of the south will stay dry thanks to this area of high pressure, but it's being squeezed away thanks to this area of low pressure that's already bringing outbreaks of rain across Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland and will continue to trickle its way eastwards through the day. So turning damp over parts of Wales and northern England at the moment. The rain will be on and off here through the day. The rain will spread into northeastern Scotland eventually after some early brightness, and a bright start to the day across East Anglia and the southeast, but it will cloud over here as we go through the day. Much of the south of England will stay dry, but staying fairly damp across southern Scotland. The rain may ease a touch in Belfast, allowing temperatures to rise to 21 Celsius. Generally in the high teens where it's dull and damp. Further south, even though it's cloudy, we should get temperatures into the low 20s. Quite a misty, murky night to come tonight as well, particularly around western coasts. Further outbreaks of rain across eastern England and Scotland, but should tend to ease as we go through the second half of the night. So many places will become dry as we head into Wednesday. It will be a pretty warm night, however, so warmer than the night just gone, with temperatures holding up in the mid or even high teens in some locations. So a humid start to Wednesday. As I said, many places will start dry, but tomorrow morning, fairly quickly, I think we'll see some outbreaks of rain pushing back into Northern Ireland, and this line of rain could have some pretty heavy bursts mixed in as it comes across parts of Scotland, then into England and Wales later on. Now, most of the day across central and eastern England looks dry, and it should turn drier to the northwest and a little fresher here. But for England and Wales, quite a warm, humid feeling day with temperatures once more in the southeast, 25, maybe 26 Celsius. That humidity may spark some heavy thundery showers on this weather front before it clears through during Thursday, and the weather remaining pretty changeable with more low pressure systems coming in this week.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Cracks appear in Russia's truce as Britain warns a mass evacuation of nationals will be impossible.
9 o'clock's the time, Tuesday's the day. It's the 27th of June. This is Breakfast in GB News. Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, has warned that an airlift evacuation of British nationals from Russia in the event of civil war would be impossible, but that the government's looking at all scenarios.
It comes as the truce that halted the advance on Moscow begins to fall apart. Vladimir Putin's vowing to punish the mutineers. The leader of the Wagner group last night called the coup a masterclass on how to launch an invasion.
Matt Hancock will today become the first politician directly involved in the COVID pandemic to face the inquiry. He held the position of Health Secretary until he was forced to resign in June 2021.
The cost of sending a migrant to Rwanda could be almost £170,000. MPs urging that plans to detain children should not be part of that. They should be abandoned. The chair of the Women and Equalities Committee, Caroline Noakes, told us that the government has a duty to look after children, not to deport people.
Our big concern is the clash of legislation, as it were, with the Children's Act running hard into the new illegal migration bill, where there would simply be a conflict between the duty we have to look after children and the government imposing a duty upon itself to remove people to Rwanda.
And the kids aren't all right, as parents and carers are tasked with paying around £422 per year on school uniform. We'll ask if they're becoming too expensive and if we even need them anymore.
What are you going to do without uniforms? I don't know. I've never been one that gets so annoyed about uniforms. Some people are outraged. You know, at school there was always some person who wanted to get rid of uniform. One student, you know, the Students' Representative Committee, and their idea was we have no uniforms.
I do remember hating my uniform and hating the strictness of the length of the skirt and the blazer and all the rest of it. I do remember, I think that's a rite of passage, isn't it? You hate your uniform. But I do think, you're right, there's a role for it, and especially think if it's affordable, it's a great leveller.
Okay. So you want to get involved, have your say, gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GBNews, and we're talking about uniforms in about 10 minutes' time. Our top story is an airlift or not an airlift evacuation of British nationals from Russia. If a full-scale civil war broke out, the Foreign Secretary has said this would be impossible.
His comments came as that truce between Vladimir Putin and the leader of the Wagner group appeared to fracture, with the Russian president calling for the organisers of the coup to be brutally punished in a televised address. Let's take a watch.
The organisers of the rebellion, betraying their country, their people, betrayed those who were lured into the crime. They lied to them, pushed them towards death, under fire, to shoot their own people. It was precisely this outcome, fratricide, that Russia's enemies wanted. Both the neo-Nazis in Kiev and their Western masters, and all sorts of national traitors. They wanted Russian soldiers to kill each other.
So President Putin's blood pressure rose after an address from the mercenary leader Prigozhin, in which he called his advance with the Wagner group on Moscow a masterclass. He said the Russian public were disappointed when he stopped.
But overnight, President Joe Biden has spoken addressing Putin's accusations that the West was somehow involved in the mutiny.
I also convened our key allies on a Zoom call to make sure we're all on the same page. It's critical that we're coordinated in our response and coordinated in what we to anticipate. They agreed with me that we had to make sure we gave Putin no excuse. Let me emphasize, we gave Putin no excuse to blame this on the West or to blame this on NATO. We made clear that we were not involved. We had nothing to do with it. This was part of a struggle within the Russian system.
OK, Paul Hawkins, our reporter across all of this one, keeping up with this story, and the narrative of this story has changed somewhat from fallout to fall in to fall out again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a love-hate relationship, isn't it? What's going on now is Vladimir Putin attempting to re-establish his authority, and also there's a power play going on here. This has been going on for months, trying to fold the Wagner group into the Russian army. They've, at the beginning of June, this edict came down from the Defence Ministry that they would have to sign the volunteer formations. It didn't mention the Wagner group by name, but essentially the Defence Minister, Sergei Shoigu, said volunteer formations will have to, by July the 1st, that's this Saturday, have to sign a contract that folds them into the British Army. And we're just hearing, by the way, this is from Reuters, quoting the Russian media agency RIA. Russia's defence ministry has said that the Wagner group is preparing to hand over equipment to the defence ministry. Now, if that's correct, then it sounds like they're handing over the equipment and they're either going to sign the contracts, or as Vladimir Putin alluded to last night, or you can go to Belarus or go home.
Of course, it's really hard to verify the authenticity of that because, of course, they want to spin that, don't they? The Defence Ministry have been massively undermined by the Wagner Group, not only in the march on Moscow, but in its success in Ukraine and, indeed, everything from dating back to Crimea when it was first created.
If they hand in their equipment, they'll not exist, will they?
Yeah, exactly. And we should, and there is a bit of power play politics going on here. Sergei Shoigu and Valery Gerasimov, the chief of staff, are part of Putin's inner circle, right? We often hear about Prigozhin called a Putin ally. yeah, he is an ally and he has helped him, that's true, but he's not in that inner circle of trust. And so they've often had, they've had gripes before, especially Valery Gerasimov, who has resented Wagner recruiting serving soldiers because he's going to pay them more, and essentially taking a much harder fighting line than the Russian Defence Forces themselves. So for Valery Gerasimov, this is about taking out Prigozhin, and a lot of people are saying that's why Prigozhin started this march towards Moscow yesterday, even though he said that he wasn't in that audio message yesterday. It wasn't a power grab. He just wanted to make the point to senior Russian defence officials that they made mistakes.
Well, what's going to happen to Prigozhin? Is that him finished? I mean, the fact that he was only an audio appearance yesterday, it wasn't in vision. Is he basically in hiding now?
Well, put it this way. In the past, Putin was asked, are you able to forgive? And he said, I am able to forgive, apart from treachery. And we know that Russia's not afraid to reach out to foreign states when it wants to eliminate people that, you know, here in the UK we know about it, when it wants to take out people that it doesn't like. It's not afraid of doing that. And in fact, Sergei Shoigu was running the GRU when the Salisbury poisonings happened. That's the intelligence arm of the Russian army. So, yeah, if I was advising Yevgeny Prigozhin, I'd be telling him to stay away from the window.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, thank you.
Paul, really appreciate that. We're now going to go to Pat McFadden, who's the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury. And Pat, we want to talk to you about lots of interesting things about mortgages and whatever. But I just look, this mightn't be your sphere and you mightn't be qualified for it, whatever. But we're all fascinated as to what's going on between Prigozhin and Putin at the moment, and if this is the end of the Wagner group or what has happened. It was a love in, it was a love out. No, it was a love out, it was a love in, and now it's a love out again between Prigozhin and Putin. What do you think is happening here? What way do you think this is going to end up?
Well, it's hard to know how it's going to end up, but I think several things have been exposed. First of all, cracks in the Russian regime. Putin likes to project this image of strength, of being the ultimate strongman. He didn't look very strong at the weekend when these events were taking place, and that will be what is bothering him most about this. The second thing, of course, is this idea of private armies. You know, can you imagine in this country a private army taking over a major city for a day and beginning a march on the capital? I mean, absolutely extraordinary. And the third thing to me was Prigozhin exposing that the excuses given for the invasion of Ukraine last year didn't stack up. I mean, he said there was no threat to Russia from Ukraine or the West at the time, and we know that this war was launched on a false pretext by Putin, and that's now been confirmed by Prigozhin. So difficult to say how this will turn out, but I think several things have been exposed by the events of the last few days.
Prigozhin has driven a coach and horses through Putin's case for war. I think he put that extremely well.
Thanks for your opinions on that, Pat. I know that was a bit off-piece, but thanks very much indeed. Very detailed.
All right.
On mortgages, we've heard from the Resolution Foundation, haven't we, recently, that they think mortgages are going to go up on average around £3,000 in the next year. What is Labour's plan to try and help people with the crisis?
Well, we produced some proposals last week, which we're putting to Parliament to have a vote on today. There are 4 or 5 proposals which I can go through, but the real point of them all is to mandate lenders to do as much as they possibly can to avoid people having their homes repossessed. These mortgage rises are a bombshell for people. Depending on where you live in the country, you could get a letter from your bank or building society saying that your payment's going to go up by £300, £400, £500 a month. And in those circumstances, This is very, very difficult for people. They've done the right thing by trying to buy their home. They've worked hard, they've saved hard for their deposit. You buy your own home and you think you've got security. Now that security is turning into, at best, uncertainty and at worst, fear. So the measures that we're putting forward today are to ask lenders to allow people who get into trouble to do things like extend the term of your loan, maybe go on an interest-only period for a while, and then to make sure that if you make yourself use these flexibilities, that it doesn't hurt your credit rating in the future. So let's do what we can with the lenders to stop people losing their homes, if that's at all possible.
To be fair, I mean, the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt is doing just that, isn't he? We heard from him yesterday that he held a meeting on Friday with lenders. He got 85% of them to sign up to a mortgage charter, which will, A, support those who are worried about repayments, but secondly, support those who are at real risk of losing their homes, specifically, as you point out, with a minimum 12-month period for first missed payments to repossessions without consent. So that's a significant step being made by the Treasury in the last few days.
And some of the lenders are doing some of these things, but the difference between what the government put together the other day with lenders and what we are saying today is we want this to be mandatory. Even with that 85% figure that you quoted there, that could mean over 1 million mortgage holders not being able to use these flexibilities, or their lenders not making them available to them. Now, the best lenders are doing some of this already, but what we wanted to make sure was that we had a mandatory package that would be available to every mortgage holder. And with the government's package, we don't quite have that, and that's part of the reason why we're forcing the vote today.
And that vote, Pat, I mean, I would have imagined, whatever the difference is between you and the government in detail, broad consensus must be with you. Are you expecting cross-bench support for what you're proposing?
Well, since I started this round of interviews this morning, I've found that the government have amended our motion. So I'm not expecting cross-party support. I think there'll be a division on this today, which is sad to see. I don't think they needed to amend our motion. I think they could have got in behind it and made sure we were all united in having a mandatory system that lenders should offer as much help as possible to borrowers who get into trouble. But it looks like we may not have the consensus that you're asking about in the Commons this afternoon.
But the good thing, the interesting thing is that you're not necessarily looking for public funds to level these payments up. I mean, this can all be done by the lenders themselves.
Yeah, we haven't called for that. I mean, obviously, our instincts are always to try to help people, but the country's public finances have been extremely stretched in recent years. The country's had to borrow a lot of money to get through COVID. We lost sight of the imperative for financial stability. Well, we didn't lose sight, but the Conservative government did last September, when that mini-budget was launched, which was the thing that really put the rocket boosters under mortgage rates to begin with. And, you know, standing here as a representative of the Labour Party, I'm not about to repeat the mistakes that the Tories made last year and take our eye off the necessity for financial stability. That's got to underpin everything that we do, and that's a requirement here as it will be in the future.
But does voting Labour necessarily result in financial stability? I mean, we only have to look at you U-turning on your £28 billion net zero plans today. I'm reading that you're now abandoning plans for your 10% tax on companies like Facebook and on Amazon because of fears of US trade sanctions. I mean, can we really trust the Labour on the economy?
Well, I believe that you can. To take the specific there, the digital measure that we proposed, that was always intended to be a temporary measure. But going forward, it's really important that you and your viewers know that we will put financial stability first. And in fact, if we make changes to policy to comply with that, that's a reason to trust us more. Because if circumstances have changed, if the economic situation has got more difficult, and we said, well, that doesn't matter, we're going to blindly proceed with what we said years ago, it doesn't matter about the economic situation, that wouldn't be the right thing to do. And it's precisely because we're putting financial stability first that we're looking at our policies, making sure that everything that we say is affordable, making sure if we make a proposal we say how we pay for it, because we understand that financial stability has to be the foundation upon which everything else is built.
Pat, got to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed for outlining your plans and that little insight into the Russian situation there. Pat McFadden is the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and he's asking MPs from across the House to get behind their package of mandatory measures to help ease the mortgage bombshell hitting you as a family.
Now, Britain's newsroom is coming up at 9:30. Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner here to tell us about what is coming up. Good morning to you both.
You've been talking about it this morning. Matt Hancock live at the COVID inquiry. Can't wait to hear that. We're going to be talking to Molly Kingsley, who set up Us For Them. She was the person, actually, that got even the impact on children, even on the terms of reference for the inquiry. So that's going to be interesting.
I've also got Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham coming on to talk about the big crisis in housing, big problem in all over the country. And also, we have to reflect on the lunatic ravings of Vladimir Putin in his speech last night as the crisis continues in Ukraine.
Okay, we look forward to it. Thank you both very much.
Coming up, as parents, are you forced to pay excessive amounts for your kids' school uniforms? Despite the cost of living crisis, we'll ask if it's time to scrap uniforms and let children wear their own clothes. Next.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Blazers, jumpers, socks, gym kit, it all adds up when it comes to buying school uniforms.
And new research out today from the Children's Society reveals that parents and guardians of secondary school children are spending around £422 per year on uniform and around £287 in primary school. So has it all got a bit too expensive?
Do kids even need uniforms these days? Mother of four, Faustina Anyawi, says uniforms shouldn't be banned, but does think that they have become pretty pricey.
Meanwhile, mum of three, Ivana Pokiu, believes in uniform despite the costs. Welcome to both of you and good morning.
And you're both in similar positions. Faustina, you have 4 children. Ivana, you have 3 children, so you're facing the same prospects, but you have different views on this. Faustina, why do you think that the uniforms are just too expensive?
Okay, thank you, Eamonn. I have 3 kids in secondary school, 3 girls actually. So each year, each of them were spending more than £400 on their uniform, including their PE kits and all of that. Now, if you look at the figures, an average salary in the UK is between 30,000 to 40,000. If you work that out, you will find out that if you compare it with the average rent of between 2 to 3 bedroom flats in the UK, especially in London, is which is about £1,140 per month. And, you know, experts advise us that you shouldn't spend more than 30% of your salary on rent. But when you look at this, you see that parents are already overspending on other necessities. And putting the pressure of uniform on the parents again becomes so, exorbitant. So I call it, this is what I call discriminatory uniform model, which is really...
Let's bring in Ivana then. I mean, do you think that that's fair, that it's a discriminatory model? Or do you think actually there's a possibility that if there weren't uniforms, parents would be persuaded into spending even more on clothes? Their kids wanting to wear designer, high-top Nikes or whatever it was, different pair every day to school?
You said it for me, basically. Yeah, absolutely. I come from Slovakia and we don't have uniforms there. So I grew up not wearing a uniform. So I know how much tension and competition and comparing and feelings of not being adequate this can cause when you don't come from a wealthy family and you don't have these branded clothes. So yeah, like you said, we might end up spending even more if uniforms are banned.
So, Ivana, the alternative to uniforms could actually be more expensive. So, it's the devil you love or whatever.
Better the devil you know.
Yeah, it's better than whatever.
Yeah, sorry, can you say again?
Yeah, sorry. I was just trying to say that they're probably better off where they are with uniforms than going out there buying what they want.
Absolutely, and it makes it easier for us parents as well, because we don't have to worry. It's busy as it is in the morning.
Yeah.
So we don't have to worry about what we're going to wear this morning.
Well, Faustina, I wonder if there's a happy medium in all of this. We don't scrap uniforms altogether, but perhaps schools could be a little less rigid in enforcing it. If blazers are a bit scruffy or old, or indeed if some children don't have them. Yeah, if you can get them cheaply from a supermarket, great. It's good as an equaliser, but it shouldn't be, at huge expense.
Yes, that's where I stand. I stand on banning branded uniform, or actually, reducing the scope of the branded uniform. Probably, maybe the jacket or the jumper could be branded, but the rest of the parts of the uniform, especially the PE kits, the socks, the white shirts, we should be able to pick out white shirts and skirts and trousers for our children from the high street, from the shops, from the Tesco's and all of those shops, so that it's easier for parents to find uniform. I'm actually a pro uniform. I don't want children having to come to school to compete on designers' clothing and all of that. But I want it to be let it be affordable. If we are projecting that we have a free school education for our children in primary and secondary school, then we shouldn't come from the back, from the backyard to
Well, ladies, class is dismissed. We've got to ring the bell there, and thank you both very much indeed. Time has beat us, but thank you. Gold star to both of you. It has to be said. In my day, we were concerned with the size of the knot in our tie.
Yeah, the length of the skirt, dare I say.
The length of your collar as well.
How baggy your jumper was.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's it from us for this morning. We'll be back bright and early from 6. Up next, though,
it is two people wearing a lovely pink uniform, coordinating, matching beautifully here, Bev and Andrew, with Britain's Newsroom.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is